No lights, no lights, no lights. Hey, top of the morning, Stefan. Piece of shit. Domestic terrorists right there, ladies and gentlemen. Death threats. Silent death threats. Yeah, just the same old shit, different day. Hanging in there, man. Hope you're doing well. This is the San Jose. This is where the Sharks play. The San Jose Sharks. They call it the Shark Tank. The Shark Tank. At one point in time, this used to be called Shark City, but now they should call this motherfucker Narc City. Narc City. Narc City Sharks. Narc City Sharks. Hey, top of the morning, Mo. Can you hear me? Got woken up the other night with some woman yelling out random shit out the front of my house. Yeah, man. Usually happen. Pay attention if you can. I know sometimes that should be irritating. But if you can't pay attention to what she's saying and shit, excuse me, that's legitimate. And like when people do that shit, it's legitimate. It's legitimate. Usually when people do that shit, man, pay attention and see if they look like they're really mentally ill. Usually they're being broadcasted out of. And the people broadcasting out of them, they say they don't speak. You know, they speak, it's almost like they can't talk right. Like they can't, it's like they can't, when they tap into them, they can't stay that long. You feel me? They can only say like 1 or 2 words and shit. Like I don't think they're able. I don't think they've mastered the, being able to hold a conversation with you through somebody else. They just say little fucking knick-knack bullshit that might, you might, something to like trigger type shit, like something that relates to you or some shit. Oh, not this. Oh, okay. I hear it. Okay, cool. They get used like vessels. Yeah, exactly, man. We all do. Like, the crazy thing is we all do. It's the thing, but when you use drugs, especially methamphetamine, when you use any of that shit that, like meth, crack, I'm not sure about heroin or weed or anything, but I definitely wouldn't discount it, but it makes it easier for them to tap into us and shit, especially like the meth and shit, because your head, you're already not in your right mind, so whatever suggestions or whatever they fucking put into your head, 9 times out of 10 you'll say that shit. Especially if you've been up for like 5 or 6 days and shit, you don't know what the fuck it is, so it's easy for them to tap in and all that fucking bullshit. And I think I think for every, I don't know this for a fact, but I think all these fucking, these medical prescriptions and shit, the drugs that the doctors give you and shit, I think they're fucking, I think they copacetic with their fucking frequencies and shit. I think they've matched. They know what frequencies. They know how to use the frequencies with that medical fucking, the medical fucking the medical drugs and shit. The psych meds, all that that severe Percocet, fucking Seroquel, all that way out shit. Yeah, hey, it does, bro. It does. Because I'm not gonna lie, at one point in time, I did that shit, man. I used to do that shit, man, and some of the shit that oh man, like the people, like when you're around people, like people handle that shit different, bro. People really fucking handle that shit different, man. Like when I did it, I used to like to fucking go out and fucking hustle, and I used to fucking, it used to motivate, but like some people, like they'll fucking be in the mirror, man, and like it used to be a group. This is when we were kids, though. It used to be a group of us, and we all used to hustle downtown, and then we all would chip in at night and get a motel and shit, and then like like people, like most people, they come down, they want to go to sleep and all that fucking shit. Man, it was motherfuckers in the bathroom, man, literally fucking picking their face raw, bro. Like bro, literally picking their, and not for like 10-15 minutes, man. I'm talking about, like, I would go to sleep and I would wake up and motherfuckers was the same motherfuckers that was in the bathroom when I went to go to sleep. It's the same motherfuckers still in the bathroom fucking with their face and shit. Saying they see bugs and all types of shit. And at first I used to think they were tripping and shit, but now that there's more gallons and shit, now that there's more gallons and shit is out here like this, maybe that shit, there's more I don't know how long. I don't know if chemtrail was around when we were kids. I think it was, but maybe like that shit, helped them see the chemtrail and shit, like helped them see the more gallons. But saying all that to say, man, and even like staying up, like that was my thing. Like when I did it, like I had to like force myself to go to sleep, or fucking if I stayed up, I would see shit. Like I wouldn't see shit like that. It would just be like quick flashes of shit, like shit out the corner of my eye or something like that. I never seen no fucking demons or no shit like that. But I seen shit like in the corner of my eyes and all that. It's a gateway. It's definitely a gateway for fucking demons. You said reptilians, all that shit, man. That shit opens you up and it fucking, yeah, man. And if you're not like, I don't know like how to say it, because it's no good way to use that shit. That shit is not good for anything, but like, if you, I don't want to make it seem like I'm promoting the use of it, because I think that shit's the devil. That's the devil now. I mean, I see it. People do too many weird things off that shit now. But definitely, if you're not fucking like work driven, or like you're not trying to make money or some shit like that, or you're not like working like whatever. If you're not using it to push you towards whatever if you're just doing it for fun and shit, you're gonna do you're just fucking, you're gonna end up picking your face off. You're gonna do all types of weird shit, man. You're gonna be walking all in the streets delirious, talking to yourself. And I think that's when you're delirious and shit, that's when they can break into you, like with the broadcasting and shit. And they say little 1 and 2 word intervals and shit. Like for me, like whenever I walk like past a mentally ill person, for some reason that they like to say Santa Cruz and shit. And the only thing I can think of that relates to Santa Cruz, because I've thought about it, and the only thing that I can think that for me ever being or having anything to do with Santa Cruz is buying my first van. Like that's the only thing with Santa Cruz. So I don't know why they would keep saying fucking Santa Cruz and shit. Also, I got my brother to look at Beth under the microscope. It looked like more gallons in it. Oh yeah, man. Definitely. I think they put that shit, bro, I think it's nanotech in there. It's nanotech in there. And that's, you know what? I tripped out. Because I used to, you know what? I got it on a few of my videos, probably like 3 or 4 of my videos, man. People out there, the police just letting people smoke meth like it's legal, bro. Just walking down the street smoking meth, and I used to hit them. Every time I put the camera on it, I said smoking like it's legal. Cause they sit down, bro. They be sitting down in the line, passing a fucking pipe to each other and shit, blowing that shit out. So I know the meth definitely, the meth helps them tap into you, bro. I don't know exactly what and how, but it helps them, because they tapped into all of us and shit. But meth, it just makes it easier to control, and there's definitely nanotechnology in that shit. Definitely. I heard also reptilian entities want you to think about pedo-chomo stuff. Oh man, yeah. And I wouldn't doubt that, man. I would, cause that shit, it does take your mind to another level. It does take your mind to another level. I mean, I can't see nobody really fucking with kids. Porn and all that shit, yeah, but the way they do that shit now, man, and the government is in control of that shit now, so the shit they put in it, it didn't used to be that clear fucking shit. It used to be like real fucking like it used to be like, it was man-made bullshit, but it just wasn't this clear shit. It's crystal now. Like, it was really fucking, it used to be called crank back in the day. This clear shit that they got going, this clear shit they got going on now, man, is complete fucking, it's not, it's making people crazy, man. And I don't knock anybody for what they do. I don't knock anybody. My thing, if you can control what you do and you don't do no weird shit off of it and all that, like, I can't say nothing about the poison you choose and shit, but, it's just fucked up that the government knows what they're doing, man. They know what they're doing. They're creating all this fucking bullshit. When you think about it, man, how fucked up, like, our government is, man, literally. Like, even, and this is no, because even though our government is like a racist fucking government, like, it doesn't discriminate, like, it eats up anybody. It doesn't care what color you are. Like, it will fucking, I'm sure fucking the Twin Towers, there were plenty of fucking white people inside of the Twin Towers as well as everybody else. So the government doesn't discriminate, but it's just crazy, like, how they implement so much negative shit into the atmosphere, man. Like, from like slavery, when slavery was supposed to be abolished, how, when black people started doing good and they came together and they had their economy and shit, they wanted to knock that shit down. They fucking, the Black Wall Street, fucking organized fucking people, organized, like, even with the Black Panthers weren't no fucking, well, they were militant, but they weren't no fucking reckless group and shit. They weren't going around and starting fucking trouble. They were more of a protection, take care of the people type thing. And, and that's just to make the world a better place, to make shit so it's, no crime and, make, everybody have to earn their keep, so to speak, not dependent on welfare and all that. We just fucking, we work and we build our economy. And fucking, they fucking bring in fucking drugs. They bring in drugs and fuck up the whole community and make it drug ridden. That creates more fucking crime. And it's just fuck, man. All this fucking wicked shit, man. Bringing drugs home and dead soldiers and shit. Fucking, you're a soldier, you go to war for fucking America and they ship back fucking heroin back in you when you die. It's like, that's all they went out there for, is to fucking get the heroin and get some soldiers killed so they could ship drugs back in them. Like, like the soldiers, that was the purpose. Fucking get some soldiers killed and ship drugs back in them. That's crazy, man. And people fucking fly that flag like it's the most respectful flag in the world. That flag represents nothing but fucking wicked evilness, man. when you'll disrespect the body of a fucking soldier who fought, you know, for your defense by shipping drugs back home in him. Like, that's disgraceful as fuck. Broken wheels. Let me see. Bro, let me see. Yeah, I believe. Well, come on. Mo was Chomo. Child, excuse me, that's legitimate. Child molester. Excuse me. Excuse me, that's legitimate. Yeah, man, that shit's not cool, man. Anything, I mean, I don't care what drug you're on, man. You should know fucking better, man. You know, you want to do all your other fucking weird shit that doesn't have anything to do with fucking hurting anybody else, especially kids. Fucking do that shit, man. But fuck, man. That's crazy, man. Like, kids will fucking remember that shit, man. That kid's gonna be an adult one day, man. And you just fucking hanging around the fucking family like that. I don't see how the fucking uncles and, you know, you hear some stories where, you know, uncles be molesting the fucking, and I've heard stories. I remember when there was this thing called Periscope. Man, it was this girl on there, man. She was crying, man, talking about committing suicide, man. And her dad had raped her and shit. And she was just on there asking everybody for advice. Like, she didn't want to go to school. No, like, she wanted to go to school and she didn't want to come back. Like, she didn't know what to do, man. And, you know, she was just tripping. She was like, she's sitting on Periscope crying, saying, he's supposed to be my dad. And that's crazy, man. People like that should be killed, man. Like, you know, and I'm no one to pass judgment on anybody, but, you know, that's enough to make a motherfucker, you know, shouldn't be, you fuck up people for the rest of their lives doing that shit. Yeah, it's fucked up, man. Yeah, I hate all drugs except weed too, bro. You don't even want to be it, man. And you know the crazy thing is, I'm starting to get to the point to where, you know, I think I know I'm smoking way too much weed, man, because it's like I barely get high. It's like I'm only smoking for the taste and shit. But psychologically, it's making me think that it's helping me deal with this shit. When in reality, man, I'm really not even, you know. And I think, you know, I'm you know, not only, you know, now that you said something about that, I think they're probably squirting that shit in the weed too, spraying that more gallon shit in the weed as well. You know, 'cause they have people out there in the park, and they're out, yeah, man. I think the police are designating people with meth that has nanotechnology in it. I think the police are literally issuing, like, giving, like, you know, certain people you know, the ability to fucking make a little bit of money by slinging that fucking Morgellon infested meth out there. Because, you know, and I'm, you know, even though they be perping me and shit like that, you know, I'm not one to call the police and tell that somebody's selling drugs. And, you know, even if I was, he's selling it for them anyway, so it wouldn't be like, but, you know, you just think, like, these motherfuckers be, and they be perping me too, man, and they, you know, they're really, like, they're connected with the team, like, the signals and all that shit, so it's not like they're doing some fucking, you know, random ass trying to perp me by themselves and shit. Like they're connected in, and they be out there like in the middle of the park, and I be tripping. I be like, because I be taking my dogs to go take a shit and use the bathroom and shit, and they just sitting right there dead smack in the middle of the fucking park pushing that shit. And just pulling the bag out and like right in the middle of the park, surrounded by everybody, just pulling the bag out. Just people coming up. That's crazy, man. Like there was a time, one point, man, and you know that was before the technology. Like, you know, you sell drugs, you go take somebody into the store, the fucking restaurant or some shit. Like you get away from the public eye. You know, you want to make sure there's not one fucking undercover looking at you and shit when you're doing that shit, man. But these motherfuckers literally, with all the technology and all the cameras, like I'm talking about years ago, you know, people were way discreet with it. So for everything to be as advanced as it is, and for you to be standing right there in the middle of the park just issuing that shit out, taking the money like literally hand to hand shit, putting it in your pocket, fucking closing the bag up and putting the bag in your pocket, man. Oh, Lord. Narc City, I tell you. It's not Shark City no more, ladies and gentlemen. This is Narc City. Cricket Narc City, too, because they're fucking doing the most cricket shit out here right now. Let's see. Yeah, I believe it opens spiritual doors. Oh yeah, definitely, man. You know, if you stay up too long, man, because you know, without the drugs, say you're completely drug free, you never did a drug in your life. You stay up for a few days on the natural, and you'll fucking have visions and shit. Like you'll see shit. Like you'll fucking you know, the Indians used to do that. Like they used to smoke. Well, they probably still smoke peyote, but they used to smoke peyote and they'd be up for days and fucking they have visions and shit. Like people, like if you can, you know, certain people can control that shit, but you know, you start staying open up, you start staying up for days and days and days and days and shit, and then you fucking off that bullshit too. You know, you start seeing shadow people and shit. You start seeing all types of shit. And those shadow people are real. Like, people think that shit's a joke. Those shadow Those shadow people are real, man. Those are the things that fucking be jumping on you and shit when you're fucking sleeping. Then you wake up and you can't fucking talk, or you can't fucking, you can't move, you can't do shit. You can't, it's like you're fucking a deer. Like, you hear all types of fucking shit around you and shit. And like if somebody opens the door, or you hear somebody's voice, like they'll fucking vamp. They'll disappear like that. Those shadow people are no fucking joke, man. People think that shit's fake, man. That shit is not fake. That shit does open up spiritual doors, man. And all you have to do is be the right host. Because everybody doesn't match up with these people, these fucking entities that fucking be jumping in and out of them. So, these entities can't control everybody. But they get into the right host. All they have to do is get into the right fucking host. It ain't no telling. It ain't no telling what that motherfucker do. I've gone off. I've gone off everything. I don't even smoke cigarettes anymore. Yeah, that's good shit, bro. Like, that's my number one thing. Like, and it's crazy. Like, I think the cigarettes is my number one fucking thing I need to get rid of, because that's like that's my biggest addiction. My biggest addiction is cigarettes. My second is weed. But it's like even if it's not fucking helping me cope with it, like psychologically, I got myself tricked into thinking that the weed is helping, man. Because it's crazy too, cause like, excuse me. At one point, before targeting and shit, and it's hella crazy. Before targeting, I swear, I used to smoke probably like 6 cigarettes a day. Probably less than that. I know I used to smoke one when I woke up and after every meal. And then probably one here and there, but ever since this targeting and shit, man, I'm blowing through like a pack a day. Maybe, yeah, shit. Probably like a pack a day, man. And I know it's the psychological shit, because the cigarettes ain't doing shit, man. The cigarettes just really, it's more of a habit. Like, the cigarettes don't really count for anything, really, until like, like when you wake up and then after the meal. But other than that, that shit ain't. And you got a terrorist coming. That shit ain't you know, that shit it don't have no effects, I don't think, on me. I think it's just a mental thing after that. This ain't the real CBS News. this ain't the. This ain't what. Oh. This ain't the real CBS News. Hold on. Is it? Let me see. Broken window lovers, huh? Scat word. I, let me see. That keeps coming down on me, you guys, so you gotta bear with me. I'm trying to read your comments. Yeah, all that shit now is different, man. It's way fucking different. I remember that show. Oh, bro, I see the name Stefan. I think Erica Arthur family man. I remember that show. It was popular. Oh, it was popular in Australia. Family Matters. Can't worry, bro. Good God. That Chi Chi. That Chi Chi. Oh, that Cree Cree. That crack crack. That crack crack. That crack crack. Maybe they're using by repeating the trigger word Santa Cruz, or maybe they want you to go to Santa Cruz. Nah, but that's the thing, though. You know, I thought, you know, Jay Black is from Santa Cruz. He said it's really bad out there. I don't, I wouldn't, I wouldn't go to Santa Cruz. I mean, to go visit or kick it or some shit, but as far as move to Santa Cruz or any of that shit, nah. The stuff that's out now is different to years ago. Yeah, it's definitely different, bro. Yeah, man. And the government, the government has its hands in everything. The government damn near is the reason all the drugs are out here anyway. So, you know, they know what to implement inside of them and all that shit. They got mad scientists from the fucking Nazi days, or, they got, you know, the mad scientists from the Nazi days who have educated the new scientists and shit. So, and if I'm not mistaken, man, I think Hitler was like the very first, the, you know, the very first, person to make contact with, different entities. I can't say that for sure, but Hitler. Hitler was into a lot of fucking, you know, he wasn't, I mean, he was killing people and shit as well, but he was into like that magic type of fucking, he was into fucking, like he finding spaceships and finding like aliens and shit. So, saying all that to say, we have technology that fucking, we have the technology being used on us now. It's been around for fucking years and years and shit. It's just been used on us covertly and shit. A lot of these people that say that they have fucking visions and they have dreams and shit. Like, I used to be into that shit. Like, people say that they died and like the people that say they died and they went away and then they came back. I kind of might be a little interested in that because I can't, if they die, that's different than, people saying they having visions and shit. You know, but I used to be really into the people saying they had visions and, you know, what it was gonna be like and shit. I used to watch those videos just to match up the stories, and a lot of them seem pretty true and shit, but, you know, are not so much that they seem true, because you can't really tell, but a lot of them seem like they could be, you know, a lot of them were not all that far-fetched, and a lot of them kind of, you know, resembled each other. But then, you know, now that I know about these fucking, that they can induce dreams on you and all that shit, like they didn't just make this shit when I recognized I was a target. So it's been around for a while. It's just been used covertly on us, man. A lot of the dreams we have probably aren't even the dreams we have. Like, as kids, from kids on up, like, everybody in this world is probably dealing with fucking induced dreams and shit. And all types of shit, man. Just think of the man who goes home and kills his family and then kills himself. Like, is that an induced thought? Or is that him really being fed up with life? Or is it him really being fed up with life and them introducing the idea? With a government who is set in place to protect you, you should not have to wonder those things. You should not have to sit and fucking juggle those three fucking options, if you will. Crank is bad news out here, Navy. Yeah, all of it's bad news. I think that shit was more, you know, it was more of a, it didn't make I didn't see too many people do the crazy shit I see him do off crystal, off crank. It was more of a, like, used it to hustle. You know, you would see, you know, people after staying up days and days and shit, you would see them going kind of delirious and talking to themselves and talking fucking jibber jabber and shit that don't make sense. But like the shit people, oh man, like, I've never seen nobody go into the bathroom and picking their face off fucking crank. I've never seen nobody do that. Like, literally pick their face off, like literally picking like chunks of skin, making craters in their face and shit. Like, I've never fucking seen nobody do that off crank. But as the shit evolved and they started telling people it was cleaner, oh, this is clean. And then they tried to put a little pretty name on it and call it ice. Ice, get the ice, it's so clean. It's washed. It's washed. It's been cleaned out. It's been washed with chemicals, motherfucker. You didn't wash it with it's all washed. It's crazy the fucking shit people say, man. This is it's the shit people fall for too. You know, the thing is, man, as long as they make drugs, people are gonna fucking, especially new, like, as long as the promotion of drugs is out there, people are gonna do drugs as long as they think they're cool and that people aren't gonna, a lot of people, like people that smoke crack, for instance. And I'm not talking about like veterans who smoke crack. I'm talking about like youngsters and shit like that who want to still keep it in the closet and shit. Like they buy double ups and try and, the ones that are fresh fucking smokers, the ones who fucking tried their product and fucking now they're fucking locked into a lifetime of fucking trying to buy double ups and sell it, but they can't seem to sell it because they always smoke it when they get it and shit. And then when you go to your fucking, when they go to their drug dealer to go get double up more, to go flip their money again, the drug dealer is like, damn, man, you came to me with 50 before. Why the fuck you only got, why the fuck you only got 30 now? Those ones, man. As long as fucking, right now, the fresh drug dealer is smoking in the closet right now. He doesn't want nobody to know because he's afraid people are going to call him a crackhead and all that. But, all it takes is a fucking rap video. Maybe like 3 or 4 rap videos of fucking, known rappers. Like, it don't even gotta be known. Just people with a good flow. Maybe a good flow and a lot of chains and a lot of women around them smoking on glass pipes and shit. Man, everybody out here be smoking crack, man. Every fucking body. I guarantee you. Kids, fucking, the promotion of drugs. The entertainment industry is definitely working with the government, man. Because anything that's promoted in the entertainment industry as far as drugs, it doesn't take long before it hit the streets. Like, I remember when that shit syrup, that bowl, that fucking cough syrup, that shit was like, you really only heard of that shit being done down south when they did screw music and shit. They slowed the music down and all that shit. But, who was it? I think it was Little Flip. Little Flip, Pimp C. A couple rappers from down south started really, promoting that shit in their music, man. Really promoting it and making it look really fucking cool. They had the cars on the big rims with the spinners and the big chains, and next thing you know, everybody's on the fucking streets doing that shit and paying outrageous amounts of money for that shit. Paying like thousands of dollars just to be drowsy all fucking day. And there's a reason that shit's promoted, man, because that shit, you do enough of it, that shit's gonna eat up your fucking kidneys and shit. And now that's why you hear about all these motherfuckers dying and shit. That's why you hear, it's not funny, but that's why you hear about all these motherfuckers dying and shit. And that, I guarantee you that's government promoted and shit. Through rappers. Government promoted through rappers. Let's see. Yeah, but all that shit is bad news. I've heard tweakers refer to it as cree-cree. Cree-cree, cree-cree, cree-cree. Cree-cree or I heard him. I heard him say something like that. I heard it titi, like Thee, like titi. Disgusting. Yeah, man, that shit ain't no good. That shit ain't no good. Especially now that they're, you know, really playing with this technology and shit, man. You do that shit, get that shit in your body, bro. Man, I'd be a zombie. I only, well, no. uh, I only know what crystal ball looks like. It felt It felt like when I smoke weed or cigarettes, it amplifies the strange shit they do. Mm, yeah, it could. It probably could. Like, I mean, it probably does. Like, I haven't been off a cigarette, so like, I've been. I don't. Yeah, I would never. Like, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be able to know that. Like, so you're probably right. It does probably amplify their shit because that shit has chemicals and shit that they know. Like that, like the shit they use on us, man. Our When our pH balance or whatever, when our body is at, certain things put us at certain frequencies and shit. Whatever we do, like it puts us at it. Like for instance, smoking weed, it puts me at probably a low frequency, like a certain frequency that they can tap into, that they can do a direct tap into because I'm at that frequency. If it was meth, they have a device that they know what frequency that the meth puts a person on, so it's easy to tap into that frequency. I think that's probably how they do it, man. As well as with these medical drugs. I think all these medical drugs put you at a certain frequency. And everything we do puts us at, because our natural frequency they probably can't tap into. Like it has to be a synthetic frequency that they put us at. A frequency that's not normally ours. I think that's probably how they do it, man. And that's probably why they tamper with everything. Our food, our water, and all that shit. Try and get us to the frequencies and shit they want us at. I think, and I honestly think you guys, like, I don't know if any of you guys probably, I think most of us experienced it no matter where we're at. But if you remember when you were a kid and you were in grade school, probably like first or second grade, probably could have been fourth. But they used to take us to these little bungalows. And they would run tests on us and shit. They would put these fucking big ass gray fucking headphones on us. And they would play beeping sounds. And they would say, raise your hand if you hear this beep. Everybody didn't raise their hand at the same time. Everybody, they told us it was a hearing test. But the way those fucking frequencies, and sometimes I'll hear that sound, like I know they're shooting something at me because I'll hear like it'll sound like one of those fucking frequencies they play through those gray earphones. So I think that locks somehow that shit tells them something about us, man. By them shooting and asking us if we could hear this, and raise your hand if you hear this, and like that, it tells them something about us. Is this excuse me, that's legitimate. Yeah, I feel I know. I felt like with us. Okay. Synthetic heroin from China, corn through Mexico is killing for sure. Addicts. Oh yeah, that what do they call that? They got some shit right now called they're putting that shit in everything too. People are dying left and right. It's some new shit, but they're implementing it in a lot of fucking. They're implementing it. You can buy it really by itself. You can buy it by itself, but you know, they're implementing it in all the drugs because it boosts it up, like, and people are fucking croaking like shit. People are dying left and right off that shit. I got this goofball over here brightening the hell out of me, probably shooting some type of fucking, I don't know. Alright, let's get out of here. I'm gonna find someplace else to go. I knew it was a matter of time before they caught up with me. Like, they've been fucking following me all night. One headlights and all that fucking weird shit. They love these fucking cars right here. Toyota Prius. They're on the prowl, ladies and gentlemen. I got little MK Ultra lights up here under the tunnel where all the homeless sleep. Well, not all of them, but you know. Die in your program, sir. See, they do shit, little shit like that, put little bullshit in the middle of the thing. These are the games they play. It is 3:40 in the morning, ladies and gentlemen. You can bet your bottom dollar everybody, damn near everybody on this fucking street driving is a perp. Except people out here recycling and homeless people. Most regular people are at fucking home and shit. Fucking rats. Then they send their fucking informants and shit, man. Oh, go, informant. All these fucking are rats. Like, look. All these are fucking, riding around in fucking Beamers and shit at 3:40 in the morning. Luxury cars. These are your informants. Your informants, your perps, your undercover police, your handlers. Yeah, it's a number of these motherfuckers around each other right now. Look. They love those cars, I tell you. They love those. They love Toyota Priuses. They love Teslas. And then the other ones, they just got what they got. But, those are the major cars that you see in this shit. Oh shit, they wipe the comments off you guys. Gotta make wide turns because they keep letting air on my tires and shit. Now, I'm trying to find a street where there's no cars parked on. I'll show you guys something. Should I check that or not? But, let me see. before they start coming out the woodworks. Oh yeah, this is the houses right here. Boy, this is one of those slumlords. They say the dude that owns these two, he owns Victorians all over downtown. They say he got homes in like the Bahamas and all types of fucking nice ass houses. And shit, he be taking like some of these people. You know, they be taking straight advantage of them and shit. They be taking some of these people and shit and having them work for them. But that's like a place where it's a lot of mentally ill people. And that one right there. It's like two of them. 2 Victorian houses. And then he owns a bunch of them. It's crazy. Oh, shit. Is this live still going on? Is it still going on? I can't see no comments. Oh, wow. Now I just see the names. They're doing something. Oh. If y'all still on here, I'll be right back. I'm gonna go grab a fence real quick. Targeted individual.
up on it. Even though I pushed them away and want them to give up on me, they never gave up on me. They're like that annoying fly that never goes away. They'll find you. If they don't find you, they'll call you. They can't get you.
The FBI is a government agency supposedly intended to protect American civilians from the worst criminals imaginable, from domestic terrorists to serial killers. But who do you run to when the FBI wants you dead? It may seem like the high-concept premise of the latest Jason Bourne movie, but this was actually the terrifying reality faced by a number of political leaders and public figures as a result of COINTELPRO, the FBI's clandestine series of projects intended to bring American activism to its knees. But what was COINTELPRO really? When did it happen? Who were its targets? And what terrifying illegal methods were employed under its purview? There's only one way to find out. But be warned, by the time this video is over, the FBI won't seem like the brave crime stoppers the movies often paint them as. Under COINTELPRO, which stands for Counterintelligence Program, they were responsible for everything from psychological warfare to cold-blooded murder, all committed against mostly non-violent individuals whose greatest crime was questioning the system. Just how far the system will go to silence these questions will alarm and terrify you. And at the heart of it all was FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover, who opened a nightmarish Pandora's box of government overreach and illegal domestic espionage. The year is 1956, and the Red Scare is in full swing. You don't need to be an expert in American political history to know that mid-1950s America was terrified of communism. The threat of the bomb loomed large over American psyches, and Soviet spies and sleeper agents seemed to lurk in every shadow. Russia and the West were fighting a culture war, and the US was scared it was losing. When someone is afraid and backed into a corner, there's almost nothing they won't do to protect themselves, whether the initial fear is justified or not. The US needed bold strategies to fight the perceived communist threat growing within their own borders, and J. Edgar Hoover was on the case. He gave his underlings a sweeping directive to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize any political groups deemed too submersive for the FBI's liking. Hoover had the tacit permission of President Eisenhower and soon after President Kennedy, and Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy personally signed off on a number of covert projects under the COINTELPRO banner. Of course, while every sinister government project requires some enabling bureaucrats to sign all the permission slips, there always needs to be some triggermen willing to get their hands dirty and get the dastardly job done. In this case, we have William C. Sullivan, Director of the FBI's Domestic Intelligence Operations. Sullivan's first target was the Communist Party of America, who, on name alone, were obviously no friends of the Cold War FBI. Some of the techniques used by the FBI to destroy the Communist Party from the inside, including having agents sending threatening anonymous phone calls, having the IRS constantly audit them, and sending in forged documents to sow dissent among the party's ranks. You'll come to notice that this is a running theme among the COINTELPRO projects, using psychological warfare tactics to turn groups against each other and alienate their members. To this end, literally nothing was off the table. FBI agents infiltrating meetings and posing as members to cause conflict, intelligence gathering for blackmail and extortion, and even spreading rumors to increase the tension. Though compared to just how horrific and violent their methods would later become, some blackmail and rumor spreading is pretty quaint. While the Communist Party was a perfect training ground for refining their domestic espionage techniques, the activities that would make COINTELPRO infamous were perpetrated against civil rights groups, starting in the late 50s and continuing through the 60s. Dr. T.R.M. Howard, a prominent black surgeon, entrepreneur, and civil rights leader, was critical of the FBI's inaction on a number of infamous hate crimes, including the murders of Emmett Till and George Washington Lee. This prompted Hoover to turn the dangerous attentions of Sullivan and his FBI cronies to black civil rights groups, starting with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, on the grounds that they were supposedly hotbeds of subversive communist activity. The Southern Christian Leadership Conference was just the tip of the iceberg, though. During their 15-year heyday, COINTELPRO would infiltrate and attack the Black Panther Party, anti-Vietnam War organizers, feminist groups, environmentalist and animal rights groups, the Nation of Islam, the Young Lords Puerto Rico Independence Group, and the American Indian Movement. In their very minor defense, they also did take on the Ku Klux Klan, But when you need to compare yourself to the Klan to have moral high ground, you're not doing well. Perhaps their most infamous victims were two of the most well-known civil rights leaders in American history, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Malcolm X. It all gets a whole lot worse from here. In 1963, Dr. King gave his iconic I Have a Dream speech during the March on Washington, while generations of people across the world were touched and inspired by this incredible piece of history. The FBI were terrified. Dr. King was dreaming too big for their liking, and they wanted to put him in his place, that place being 6 feet below the ground. Hoover ordered Sullivan to turn his attention to discrediting and destroying King and the movement he'd come to represent. Sullivan subsequently released a horrifically racist statement. In the light of King's powerful demagogic speech, we must mark him now, if we've not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the Negro and national security. The espionage began. King's home and hotel rooms were bugged, and his phones were tapped. The FBI was listening intently to his every word for blackmail material that they could use to silence King. You're probably asking, silence him? As in pressure him into discontinuing activism and renouncing his beliefs? To which we'd answer, no. They wanted Dr. King to kill himself. In 1964, after years of collecting audio evidence of Dr. King's marital affairs, King was sent a suicide package 2 days before he was supposed to collect his Nobel Peace Prize. The package included copies of the incriminating audio, as well as a truly horrifying letter. The letter, while anonymous, is believed to some to have been written by Sullivan himself. It's a verbally abusive speech that opens with King. In view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or Reverend or a Doctor, and your last name calls to mind only the type of kings such as King Henry VIII and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. The letter almost reads like the cruelest internet comment you've ever seen, complete with a plethora of personal insults and spelling errors. And much like an internet troll with a serious mean streak, the letter ends by attempting to pressure Dr. King into committing suicide. It reads, King, there is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. This exact number has been selected for a specific reason, and it has a definite practical significance. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is bared to the nation. While for legal reasons they stop just short of saying straight up, kill yourself or we'll humiliate you, the implications are crystal clear. When King didn't give in and take his own life, Cartha Deloach, the FBI assistant director at the time, began leaking the incriminating evidence to every news outlet imaginable. They were ruthless in their willingness to destroy reputations and lives to achieve their goals, but things were going to get a whole lot worse. While they were trying to manipulate Dr. King into taking his own life, the FBI were stoking the fires of tension among the Nation of Islam and the Organization of Afro-American Unity, both known for their association with civil rights leader El-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, better known as Malcolm X. Through COINTELPRO, the FBI widened the rift between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad, the leader of the Nation of Islam. After a sustained harassment campaign involving infiltration, rumor mongering, and the artificial elevation of conflict, the disagreements of Malcolm X and Muhammad turned deadly, and Malcolm X was assassinated by some Nation of Islam gunmen. While the FBI denied direct involvement in the assassination, there's extremely credible evidence that their involvement in exacerbating the conflict led to the murder. As the 1960s drew on, the FBI intensified its COINTELPRO operations against prominent civil rights groups, Dr. King and his associates in particular. This project was known as COINTELPRO Black Hate. According to a 1968 FBI memo, they feared that Martin Luther King Jr. was becoming a kind of messiah figure and would unite the various disparate civil rights groups into a force that could truly be reckoned with. If Dr. King ever decided to reject nonviolence and lead to an armed revolt, they would be in serious trouble. King was public enemy number one, but prominent members of groups like the Black Panthers weren't far behind. All of them had to go. The FBI concluded with numerous police departments in cities with considerable Black Panther presences, including San Diego, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Philadelphia, and Chicago. They would coordinate raids into the homes of Black Panther members without warrants, during which many of said members were shot dead by police. One particularly infamous example is the assassination of Chicago Black Panther Party chairman Fred Hampton. On December 4th, 1969, Hampton was drugged and incapacitated by deep cover FBI infiltrator William O'Neill. A Chicago PD tactical unit then entered his home at the FBI's behest and murdered Hampton in his bed in cold blood. No crime was too cruel and no tactic was too underhanded for COINTELPRO. With the help of colluding police departments departments, the FBI was able to launch a brutal harassment campaign against figures in the world of leftist politics and civil rights. Specific individuals like Elmer Geronimo Pratt, a Black Panther Party leader, were accused of crimes they didn't commit and arrested on false pretenses. Evidence was falsified, witnesses were intimidated, and legality was twisted to serve whatever purpose the FBI wanted it to. Pratt spent 27 years in jail for a fallacious murder charge just because he was a member of the Panthers. Members of the KKK, like Gary Thomas Rowe, were kept on the FBI payroll as informants, while still committing atrocities like the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. And this wasn't an isolated incident. Under COINTELPRO, it was clear that the FBI preferred hardline white supremacist groups to black liberation movements. They funded and supported former members of the 1960s far-right group the Minutemen in their goal to create this secret army organization, essentially a militant terrorist cell that fought against civil rights groups with tactics of intimidation and outright violence. Hundreds, if not thousands, of potential enemies of the FBI were spied on with everything from wiretaps to direct stalking techniques. They even teamed up with the CIA in 1967 as part of their own domestic spying project, Operation Chaos. The COINTELPRO reign of terror would consume the whole decade, a decade mostly known for flower power, free love, and imported British rock. The whole program was so sprawling that even figures like James Baldwin, Ernest Hemingway, and Muhammad Ali were on their list of enemies. Incidentally, Muhammad Ali ended up being a major force in the end of the COINTELPRO operations, as his 1971 fight with Joe Frazier acted as a form of cover, while activist group Citizens Commission to investigate the FBI broke into an FBI field office in Pennsylvania. The group stole critical files on the COINTELPRO operations and blew the lid on the whole sordid affair, leading to considerable scandals and shame for the FBI and the public eye. Within a year, J. Edgar Hoover had announced that centralized COINTELPRO operations were officially over, and while the FBI has hardly been squeaky clean since, the dissolution of the centralized COINTELPRO operations was an undeniable win for anyone who likes the idea of living in a truly free country. Of course, only a fraction of the files were stolen, and many of the files subsequently released by the FBI have been heavily altered and redacted. The fact is, we will never know the full extent of the FBI's sinister activities between 1956 and 1971. But what we do know is that the FBI activities under the COINTELPRO umbrella were some of the most terrifying and illegal in American history. Groups who were simply exercising their quintessentially American First Amendment rights were attacked, defamed, arrested, and dissolved. And the people who formed these groups were at best threatened and manipulated, and at worst murdered and pressured towards suicide. We wish we could give you a more comforting ending, but instead, we'll leave you with two questions. What are the chances that COINTELPRO was an isolated incident? And what else have the FBI done that we don't even know about? Check out FBI's most violent, most wanted of all time, and FBI versus CIA. How do they compare? For more fascinating FBI facts.
Welcome to the Huberman Lab podcast, where we discuss science and science-based tools for everyday life. I'm Andrew Huberman, and I'm a professor of neurobiology and ophthalmology at Stanford School of Medicine. For today's podcast, we're going to talk about the parts list of the nervous system. Now, that might sound boring, but these are the bits and pieces that together make up everything about your experience of life. From what you think about to what you feel, what you imagine, and what you accomplish from the day you're born until the day you die. That parts list is really incredible because it has a history associated with it that really provides a window into all sorts of things like engineering, warfare, religion, and philosophy. So I'm going to share with you the parts list that makes up who you are through the lens of some of those other aspects of life and other aspects of the history of the discovery of the nervous system. By the end of this podcast, I promise you're going to understand a lot more about how you work and how to apply that knowledge. There's going to be a little bit of story. There's going to be a lot of discussion about the people who made these particular discoveries. There'll be a little bit of technical language. There's no way to avoid that. But at the end, you're going to have in hand what would be the equivalent of an entire semester of learning about the nervous system and how you work. So, a few important points before we get started. I am not a medical doctor. That means I don't prescribe anything. I'm a professor, so sometimes I'll profess things. In fact, I profess a lot of things. We are going to talk about some basic functioning of the nervous system, parts, and etc., but we're also going to talk about how to apply that knowledge. That said, your healthcare, your well-being is your responsibility, so anytime we talk about tools, please filter it through that responsibility. Talk to a healthcare professional if you're going to explore any new tools or practices, and be smart in your pursuit of these new tools. I also want to emphasize that this podcast and the other things I do on social media are my personal goal of bringing zero cost to consumer information to the general public. It is separate from my role at Stanford University. In that spirit, I really want to thank the sponsors of today's podcast. The first one is Athletic Greens, which is an all-in-one drink. It's a greens drink that has vitamins, minerals, probiotics, prebiotics. I've been using Athletic Greens since 2012, so I'm really delighted that they're sponsoring the podcast. The reason I like it is because I like vitamins and minerals. I think they're important to my health, and it can be kind of overwhelming to know what to take in that landscape. So by taking one thing that also happens to taste really good, I get all the vitamins, minerals, etc. that I need. There's also a lot of data out there now about the importance of the gut microbiome for immune health and for the gut-brain axis, all these things. And the probiotics and prebiotics are important to me for that reason. If you want to try Athletic Greens, you can go to athleticgreens.com/Huberman and put in the code word Huberman at checkout. If you do that, they'll send you a year's supply of vitamin D3 and K2. There's a lot in the news lately about the importance of vitamin D3. We can all get vitamin D3 from sunlight, but many of us aren't getting enough sunlight. Vitamin D3 has been shown to be relevant to the immune system and the hormone systems, etc. So once again, that's athleticgreens.com/Huberman. Enter Huberman at checkout, and you get the year's supply of D3 and K2 along with your Athletic Greens. This podcast is also brought to us by Inside Tracker, which is a health monitoring company. It uses blood tests and saliva tests to look at things like DNA and metabolic markers, and monitors your hormones, a huge number of different parameters of health that really can only be measured accurately through blood and saliva tests. I use Inside Tracker because I'm a big believer in data. There's a lot of aspects to our biology that can only be accurately measured by way of blood test and saliva test. The thing that's really nice about Inside Tracker is that rather than just giving you a bunch of numbers back of the levels of these things in your body, it gives you, through a really simple platform, information about what to do with all those levels of hormones and metabolic markers, etc. It also has a feature which is particularly interesting, which it measures your inner age, which is more a measure of your biological age as opposed to your chronological age. And all that information is organized so that you can make changes in your nutritional regimes or your exercise regimes and watch how those markers change over time. So if you want to try Inside Tracker, you can go to insidetracker.com/Huberman, and they'll give you 25% off at checkout. So let's talk about the nervous system. The reason I say your nervous system and not your brain is because your brain is actually just one piece of this larger, more important thing, frankly, that we call the nervous system. The nervous system includes your brain and your spinal cord, but also all the connections between your brain and your spinal cord and the organs of your body. It also includes, very importantly, all the connections between your organs back to your spinal cord and brain. So the way to think about how you function at every level, from the moment you're born until the day you die, everything you think and remember and feel and imagine, is that your nervous system is this continuous loop of communication between the brain, spinal cord, and body body, spinal cord, and brain. In fact, we really can't even separate them. It's one continuous loop. You may have heard of something called a Mobius Strip. A Mobius Strip is almost like one of these impossible figures that no matter which angle you look at it from, you can't tell where it starts and where it ends. And that's really how your nervous system is built. That's the structure that allows you to, for instance, deploy immune cells, to release cells that will go kill infection when you're in the presence of infection. Most people just think about that as a function of the immune system, but actually it's your nervous system that tells organs like your spleen to release killer cells that go and hunt down those bacterial and viral invaders and gobble them up. if you have a stomach ache, for instance, sure, you feel that in your stomach, but it's really your nervous system that's causing the stomach ache. The ache aspect of it is a nervous system feature. So when we want to talk about experience, or we want to talk about how to change the self in any way, we really need to think about the nervous system first. It is fair to say that the nervous system governs all other biological systems of the body, and it's also influenced by those other biological systems. So if we're talking about the nervous system, we need to get a little specific about what we mean. It's not just this big loop of wires. In fact, there's an interesting story about that, because at the turn of the sort of 1800s to 1900s, it actually was believed that our nervous system was just one giant cell. But two guys, the names aren't super important, but in fairness to their important discovery, Ramon y Cajal, a Spaniard, Camillo Golgi, an Italian guy, figured out how to label or stain the nervous system in a way that revealed, oh my goodness, we're actually made up of trillions of these little cells, nerve cells, that are called neurons. And that's what a neuron is. It's just a nerve cell. They also saw that those nerve cells weren't touching one another. They're actually separated by little gaps. And those little gaps you may have heard of before, they're called synapses. Those synapses are where the chemicals from one neuron are kind of spit out or vomited into, and then the next nerve cell detects those chemicals and then passes electricity down its length to the next nerve cell, and so forth. So really the way to think about your body and your thoughts and your mind is that you are a flow of electricity, right? There's nothing mystical about this. You're a flow of electricity between these different nerve cells, and depending on which nerve cells are active, you might be lifting your arm or lowering your arm. You might be seeing something and perceiving that it's red, or you might be seeing something and perceiving that it's green, all depending on which nerve cells are electrically active at a given moment. The example of perceiving red or perceiving green is a particularly good example, because so often our experience of the world makes it seem as if these things that are happening outside us are actually happening inside us. But the language of the nervous system is just electricity. It's just like a Morse code of some sort, or the syllables and words and consonants and vowels of language. It just depends on how they're assembled, what order. And so that brings us to the issue of how the nervous system works. The way to think about how the nervous system works is that our experiences, our memories, everything is sort of like the keys on a piano being played in a particular order, right? If I play the keys on a piano in a particular order and with a particular intensity, that's a given song. We could make that analogous to a given experience. It's not really that the key, A sharp or E flat is the song. It's just one component of the song. So when you hear that, for instance, there's a brain area called the hippocampus, which there is, that's involved in memory, well, it's involved in memory, but it's not that memories are stored there as, sentences. They're stored there as patterns of electricity in neurons that, when repeated, give you the sense that you're experiencing the thing again. In fact, déjà vu, the sense that what you're experiencing is so familiar and like something that you've experienced previously, is merely that the neurons that were active in one circumstance are now becoming active in the same circumstance again. And so it's really just like hearing the same song, maybe not played on a piano, but next time on a classical guitar. There's something similar about that song, even though it's being played on two different instruments. So I think it's important that people understand the parts of their nervous system, and that it includes so much more than just the brain, and that there are these things, neurons and synapses, but really that it's the electrical activity of these neurons that dictates our experience. So if the early 1900s were when these neurons were discovered, certainly a lot has happened since then. And in that time between the early 1900s and now, there's some important events that actually happened in history that give us insight, or gave us insight, into how the nervous system works. One of the more surprising ones was actually warfare. So as most everybody knows, in warfare, people get shot and people often die, but many people get shot and they don't die. And in World War I, there were some changes in artillery, in bullets, that made for a situation where bullets would enter the body and brain at very discrete locations and would go out the other side of the body or brain and also make a very small hole at that exit location. And in doing so, produced a lot of naturally occurring lesions of the nervous system. Now you say, okay, well, how does that relate to neuroscience? Well, unlike previous years where a lot of the artillery would create these big sort of holes as the bullets would blow out of the brain or body. I know this is rather gruesome. When the holes were very discrete, they entered at one point and left at another point, they would take out or destroy very discrete bits of neural tissue of the nervous system. So people were coming back from war with holes in their brain and in other parts of their nervous system that were limited to very specific locations. In addition to that, there was some advancement in the cleaning of wounds that happened, so many more people were surviving. What this meant was that neurologists now had a collection of patients that would come back and they'd have holes in very specific locations of their brain, and they'd say things like, well, I can recognize faces, but I can't recognize who those faces belong to. I know it's a face, but I don't know who it belongs to. And after that person eventually died, the neurologist would figure out, I've had 10 patients that all told me that they couldn't recognize faces, and they all had these bullet holes that went through a particular region of the brain, and that's how we know a lot about how particular brain regions, like the hippocampus, work. In fact, some of the more amazing examples of this where people would come back and they, for instance, would speak in complete gibberish, whereas previously they could speak normally, and even though they were speaking in complete gibberish, they could understand language perfectly. That's how we know that speech and language are actually controlled by separate portions of the nervous system. And there are many examples like that. People that couldn't recognize the faces of famous people. And that actually brings us to an interesting example in modern times. Many, many years later, in the early 2000s, there was actually a paper that was published in the journal Nature, excellent journal, showing that in a human being, a perfectly healthy human being, there was a neuron that would become active, electrically active, only when the person viewed the picture of Jennifer Aniston, the actress. So literally a neuron that represented Jennifer Aniston, so-called Jennifer Aniston cells. Neuroscientists know about these Jennifer Aniston cells. If you can recognize Jennifer Aniston's face, you have Jennifer Aniston neurons. And presumably you also have neurons that can recognize the faces of other famous and non-famous people. So that indicates that our brain is really a map of our experience. We come into the world and our brain has a kind of bias towards learning particular kinds of things. It's ready to receive information and learn that information, but the brain is really a map of experience. So let's talk about what experience really is. What does it mean for your brain to work? Well, I think it's fair to say that the nervous system really does 5 things, maybe 6. The first one is sensation. So this is important to understand for any and all of you that want to change your nervous system or to apply tools to make your nervous system work better. Sensation is a non-negotiable element of your nervous system. You have neurons in your eye that perceive certain colors of light and certain directions of movement. You have neurons in your skin that perceive particular kinds of touch, like light touch or firm touch or painful touch. You have neurons in your ears that perceive certain sounds. Your entire experience of life is filtered by these, what we call sensory receptors, if you want to know what the name is. So this always raises an interesting question. People ask, well, is there much more out there? Is there a lot more happening in the world that I'm not experiencing or that humans aren't experiencing? And the answer, of course, is yes. There are many species on this planet that are perceiving things that we will never perceive unless we apply technology. The best example I could think of off the top of my head would be something like infrared vision. There are snakes out there, pit vipers and so forth, that can sense heat emissions from other animals. They don't actually see their shape, they sense their heat shape and their heat emissions. Humans can't do that unless, of course, they put on infrared goggles or something that would allow them to detect those heat emissions. There are turtles and certain species of birds that migrate long distances that can detect magnetic fields because they have neurons. Again, it's the nervous system that allows them to do this. So they have neurons in their nose and in their head that allow them to migrate along magnetic fields in order to as amazing as this sounds, go from one particular location in the ocean, thousands of miles away, to all aggregate on one particular beach at a particular time of year so that they can mate, lay eggs, and then wander back off into the sea to die, and then their young will eventually hatch. Those little cute little turtles will shuffle to the ocean, swim off, and go do the exact same thing. They don't migrate that distance by vision. They don't do it by smell. They do it by sensing magnetic fields. Okay? And many other species do these incredible things. Humans are not magnetic sensing organisms. We can't do that because we don't have receptors that sense magnetic fields. There's some data that maybe some humans can sense magnetic fields, but you should be very skeptical of anyone that's convinced that they can do that with any degree of robustness or accuracy, because even the people that can do this aren't necessarily aware that they can. Maybe a topic for a future podcast. So we have sensation. Then we have perception. Perception is our ability to take what we're sensing and focus on it and make sense of it, to explore it, to remember it. So really, perceptions are just whichever sensations we happen to be paying attention to at any moment. And you can do this right now. You can experience perception and the difference between perception and sensation very easily. If, for instance, I tell you to pay attention to the contact of your feet, the bottoms of your feet, with whatever surface they happen to be in contact with. Maybe it's shoes, maybe it's the floor. If your feet are up, maybe it's air. The moment you place what we call the spotlight of attention or the spotlight of perception on your feet, you are now perceiving what was happening there, what was being sensed there. The sensation was happening all along, however. So while sensation is not negotiable, you can't change your receptors unless you adopt some new technology. Perception is under the control of your attention. And the way to think about attention is it's like a spotlight. Except it's not one spotlight. You actually have two attentional spotlights. Anyone that tells you you can't multitask, tell them they're wrong. And if they disagree with you, tell them to contact me. Because in old world primates, of which humans are, we are able to do what's called covert attention. We can place a spotlight of attention on something, for instance, something we're reading or looking at, or someone that we're listening to, and we can place a second spotlight of attention on something we're eating and how it tastes, or our child running around in the room, or my dog. You can split your attention into two locations, but of course you can also bring your attention, that is your perception, to one particular location. You can dilate your attention, kind of like making a spotlight more diffuse, or you can make it more concentrated. This is very important to understand if you're going to think about tools to improve your nervous system, whether or not that tool is in the form of a chemical that you decide to take, maybe a supplement to increase some chemical in your brain, if that's your choice, or a brain-machine device, or you're going to try and learn something better by engaging in some focused or motivated pursuit for some period of time each day. Attention is something that is absolutely under your control, in particular when you're rested. And we'll get back to this, but when you are rested, and we'll define rest very clearly, you are able to direct your attention in very deliberate ways. And that's because we have something in our nervous system which is sort of like a two-way street. And that two-way street is a communication between the aspects of our nervous system that are reflexive and the aspects of our nervous system that are deliberate. So we all know what it's like to be reflexive. You go through life, you're walking. If you already know how to walk, you don't think about your walking, you just walk. And that's because the nervous system wants to pass off as much as it can to reflexive action. That's called bottom-up processing. It really just means that information is flowing in through your senses, regardless of what you're perceiving. That information is flowing up and it's directing your activity. But at any moment, for instance, let's say a car screeches in front of you around the corner and you suddenly pause. You are now moving into deliberate action. You would start looking around in a very deliberate way. The nervous system can be reflexive in its action, or it can be deliberate. If reflexive action tends to be what we call bottom-up, deliberate action and deliberate perceptions and deliberate thoughts are top-down. They require some effort and some focus, but that's the point. You can decide to focus your attention and energy on anything you want. You can decide to focus your behavior in any way you want, but it will always feel like it requires some effort and some strain, whereas when you're in reflexive mode, just walking and talking and eating and doing your thing, it's going to feel very easy. And that's because your nervous system basically wired up to be able to do most things easily without much metabolic demand, without consuming much energy. But the moment you try and do something very specific, you're going to feel a sort of mental friction. It's going to be challenging. So we've got sensations, perceptions, and then we've got things that we call feelings/emotions. And these get a little complicated because almost all of us, I would hope all of us, are familiar with things like happiness and sadness or boredom or frustration. Scientists argue like crazy, neuroscientists and psychologists, and philosophers for that matter, argue like crazy about what these are and how they work. Certainly, emotions and feelings are the product of the nervous system. They involve the activity of neurons. But as I mentioned earlier, neurons are electrically active, but they also release chemicals. And there's a certain category of chemicals that has a very profound influence on our emotional states. They're called neuromodulators, and those neuromodulators have names that probably you've heard of before, things like dopamine and serotonin and acetylcholine, epinephrine. Neuromodulators are really interesting because they bias which neurons are likely to be active and which ones are likely to be inactive. A simple way to think about neuromodulators is they are sort of like playlists that you would have on any kind of device where you're going to play particular categories of music. So for instance, dopamine, which is often discussed as the molecule of reward or joy, it is involved in reward, and it does tend to create a sort of upbeat mood when released in appropriate amounts in the brain. But the reason it does that is because it makes certain neurons and neural circuits, as we call them, more active and others less active. Okay, so serotonin, for instance, is a molecule that when released tends to make us feel really good with what we have, our sort of internal landscape and the resources that we have, whereas dopamine, more than being a molecule of reward, is really more a molecule of motivation toward things that are outside us and that we want to pursue. And we can look at healthy conditions or situations like being in pursuit of a goal where every time we accomplish something en route to that goal, a little bit of dopamine is released and we feel more motivation. That happens. We can also look at the extreme example of something like mania, where somebody is so relentlessly in pursuit of external things like money and relationships that they're sort of in this delusional state of thinking that they have the resources that they need in order to pursue all these things when in fact they don't. So these neuromodulators can exist in normal levels, low levels, high levels, and that actually gives us a window into a very important aspect of neuroscience history that all of us are impacted by today, which is the discovery of antidepressants and so-called antipsychotics. In the 1950s, 60s, and 70s, it was discovered that there are compounds, chemicals, that can increase or decrease serotonin, that can increase or decrease dopamine. And that led to the development of most of what we call antidepressants. Now, the trick here, the problem, is that most of these drugs, especially in the 1950s and 60s, they would reduce serotonin, but they would also reduce dopamine, or they would increase serotonin, but they would also increase some other neuromodulator or chemical. And that's because all these chemical systems in the body, but the neuromodulators in particular, have a lot of receptors. Now, these are different than the receptors we were talking about earlier. The receptors I'm talking about now are sort of like parking spots where dopamine is released, and if it attaches to a receptor, say, on the heart, it might make the heart beat faster because there's a certain kind of receptor on the heart, whereas if dopamine is released and goes and attaches to muscle, it might have a completely different effect on muscle, and in fact, it does. So different receptors on different organs of the body are the ways that these neuromodulators can have all these different effects on different aspects of our biology. This is most salient in the example of some of the antidepressants that have sexual side effects, or that blunt appetite, or that blunt motivation. Many of these, which increase serotonin, can be very beneficial for people it can elevate their mood, it can make them feel better, but they also, if the doses are too high or if that particular drug isn't right for somebody, that person experiences challenges with motivation or appetite or libido because serotonin is binding to receptors in the areas of the brain that control those other things as well. So we talked about sensation, we talked about perception. When we talk about feelings, we have to consider these neuromodulators. And we have to consider also that feelings and emotions are contextual. In some cultures, showing a lot of joy or a lot of sadness is entirely appropriate. In other cultures, it's considered inappropriate. So I don't think it's fair to say that there's a sadness circuit or area of the brain or a happiness circuit or area of the brain. However, it is fair to say that certain chemicals and certain brain circuits tend to be active when we are in motivated states, tend to be active when we are in non-motivated, lazy states, tend to be active when we are focused, and tend to be active when we are not focused. I want to emphasize also that emotions are something that we generally feel are not under our control. We feel like they kind of geyser up within us and they just kind of happen to us. And that's because they are somewhat reflexive. We don't really set out with a deliberate thought to be happy or deliberate thought to be sad. We tend to experience them in kind of a passive, reflexive way. And that brings us to the next thing, which are thoughts. Thoughts are really interesting because in many ways they're like perceptions, except that they draw on not just what's happening in the present, but also things we remember from the past and things that we anticipate about the future. The other thing about thoughts that's really interesting is that thoughts can be both reflexive, they can just be occurring all the time, sort of like pop-up windows on a poorly filtered web browser, or they can be deliberate. We can decide to have a thought. In fact, right now you could decide to have a thought just like you would decide to write something out on a piece of paper. You could decide that you're listening to a podcast, that you are in a particular location. You're not just paying attention to what's happening, you're directing your thought process. And a lot of people don't understand or at least appreciate that the thought patterns and the neural circuits that underlie thoughts can actually be controlled in this deliberate way. And then finally, there are actions. Actions or behaviors are perhaps the most important aspect to our nervous system. Because, first of all, our behaviors are actually the only thing that are going to create any fossil record of our existence. You know, after we die, the nervous system deteriorates, our skeleton will remain, but it's, you know, in the moment of experiencing something very joyful or something very sad, it can feel so all-encompassing that we actually think that it has some meaning beyond that moment. But actually, for humans, and I think for all species, the sensations, the perceptions, and the thoughts, and the feelings that we have in our lifespan, none of that is actually carried forward, except the ones that we take and we convert into actions such as writing, actions such as words, actions such as engineering new things. And so the fossil record of our species and of each one of us is really through action. And that in part is why so much of our nervous system is devoted to converting sensation, perceptions, feelings, and thoughts into actions. In fact, the great neuroscientist or physiologist Sherrington won a Nobel Prize for his work in mapping some of the circuitry, the connections between nerve cells that give rise to movement. And he said movement is the final common pathway. The other way to think about it is that one of the reasons that our central nervous system, our brain and spinal cord, include this stuff in our skull but also connect so heavily to the body is because most everything that we experience, including our thoughts and feelings, was really designed to either impact our behavior or not. And the fact that thoughts allow us to reach into the past and anticipate the future and not just experience what's happening in the moment gave rise to an incredible capacity for us to engage in behaviors that are not just for the moment. They're based on things that we know from the past and that we would like to see in the future. And this aspect to our nervous system of creating movement occurs through some very simple pathways. The reflexive pathway basically includes areas of the brainstem we call central pattern generators. When you walk, provided you already know how to walk, you are basically walking because you have these central pattern generators, groups of neurons that generate right foot, left foot, left foot kind of movement. However, when you decide to move in a particular deliberate way that requires a little more attention, you start to engage areas of your brain for top-down processing, where your forebrain works from the top down to control those central pattern generators, so that maybe it's right foot, left foot, right foot, left foot, if maybe you're hiking along some rocks or something and you have to engage in that kind of movement. So movement is just like thoughts, can be either reflexive or deliberate. And when we talk about deliberate, I want to be very specific about how your brain works in the deliberate way, because it gives rise to a very important feature of the nervous system that we're going to talk about next, which is your ability to change your nervous system. And what I'd like to center on for a second is this notion of what does it mean for the nervous system to do something deliberately. Well, when you do something deliberately, you pay attention, you are bringing your perception to an analysis of three things: duration, how long something is going to take or should be done; path, what you should be doing; and outcome. If you do something for a given length of time, what's going to happen? Now, when you're walking down the street, or you're eating, or you're just talking reflexively, you're not doing this, what I call DPO, duration, path, outcome, type of deliberate function in your brain and nervous system. But the moment you decide to learn something, or to resist speaking, or to speak up when you would rather be quiet, anytime you're deliberately kind of forcing yourself over a threshold, you're engaging these brain circuits and these nervous system circuits that suddenly make it feel as if something is challenging, something has changed. Well, what's changed? What's changed is that when you engage in this duration, path, and outcome type of thinking or behavior or way of being, you start to recruit these neuromodulators that are released from particular areas of your brain, and also, it turns out, from your body, and they start cueing to your nervous system, something's different now about what I'm doing, something's different about what I'm feeling. Let's give an example where perhaps somebody says something that's triggering to you. You don't like it, and you know you shouldn't respond. You feel like, I shouldn't respond. You are actively suppressing your behavior through top-down processing. Your forebrain is actually preventing you from saying the thing that you know you shouldn't say, or that maybe you should wait to say, or say in a different form. This feels like agitation and stress because you're actually suppressing a circuit. We actually can see examples of what happens when you're not doing this well. Some of the examples come from children. If you look at young children, they don't have the forebrain circuitry to engage in this top-down processing until they reach age 22, even 25. But in young children, you see this in a really robust way. You'll see they'll be rocking back and forth. It's hard for them to sit still because those central pattern generators are constantly going in the background, whereas adults can sit still. A kid sees a piece of candy that it wants and will just reach out and grab it, whereas an adult probably would ask if they could have a piece or wait until they were offered a piece in most cases. People that have damage to the certain areas of the frontal lobes don't have this kind of restriction. They'll just blurt things out. They'll just say things. We all know people like this. Impulsivity is a lack of top-down control, a lack of top-down processing. The other thing that will turn off the forebrain and make it harder to top-down processing is a couple of drinks containing alcohol. Well, the removal of inhibition is actually a removal of neural inhibition, of nerve cells suppressing the activity of other nerve cells. And so when you look at people that have damage to their frontal lobes, or you look at puppies, or you look at young children, everything's a stimulus. Everything is a potential interaction for them, and they have a very hard time restricting their behavior and their speech. So a lot of the motor system is designed to just work in a reflexive way, and then when we decide we want to learn something or do something or not do something, we have to engage in this top-down restriction, and it feels like agitation because it's accompanied by the release of a neuromodulator called norepinephrine, which in the body we call adrenaline, and it actually makes us feel agitated. So for those of you that are trying to learn something new, or to learn to suppress your responses or be more deliberate and careful in your responses, that is going to feel challenging for a particular reason. It's going to feel challenging because the chemicals in your body that are released in association with that effort are designed to make you feel kind of agitated. That low-level tremor that sometimes people feel when they're really, really angry is actually a chemically induced low-level tremor. And it's what I call limbic friction. There's an area of your brain that's involved in our more primitive reflexive responses called the limbic system, and the frontal cortex is in a friction, it's in a tug-of-war with that system all the time, unless of course you have damage to the frontal lobe or you've had too much to drink or something, in which case you tend to just say and do whatever. And so this is really important to understand, because if you want to understand neuroplasticity, you want to understand how to shape your behavior, how to shape your thinking, how to change how you're able to perform in any context. The most important thing to understand is that it requires top-down processing. It requires this feeling of agitation. In fact, I would say that agitation and strain is the entry point to neuroplasticity. So let's take a look at what neuroplasticity is. Let's explore it not as the way it's normally talked about in modern culture as a neuroplasticity. Plasticity is great. Well, what exactly do people mean? Plasticity itself is just a process by which neurons can change their connections and the way they work, so that you can go from things being very challenging and deliberate, requiring a lot of effort and strain, to them being reflexive. And typically when we hear about plasticity, we're thinking about positive, or what I call adaptive plasticity. A lot of plasticity can be induced, for instance, by brain damage, but that's generally not the kind of plasticity that we want. So when I say plasticity, unless I say otherwise, I mean adaptive plasticity. And in particular, most of the neuroplasticity that people want is self-directed plasticity. Because if there's one truism to neuroplasticity, it's that from birth until about age 25, the brain is incredibly plastic. Kids are learning all sorts of things, but they can learn it passively. They don't have to work too hard or focus too hard, although focus helps, to learn new things, acquire new languages, acquire new skills. But if you're an adult and you want to change your neural circuitry at the level of emotions or behavior or thoughts or anything really, you absolutely need to ask two important questions. One, what particular aspect of my nervous system am I trying to change? Meaning, am I trying to change my emotions or my perceptions, my sensations, and which ones are available for me to change? And then the second question is, how are you going to go about that? What is the structure of a regimen to engage neuroplasticity? And it turns out that the answer to that second question is governed by how awake or how sleepy we are. So let's talk about that next. Neuroplasticity is the ability for these connections in the brain and body to change in response to experience. And what's so incredible about the human nervous system in particular is that we can direct our own neural changes. We can decide that we want to change our brain. In other words, our brain can change itself, and our nervous system can change itself. And the same can't be said for other organs of the body. Even though our other organs of the body have some ability to change, they can't direct it. They can't think and decide, your gut doesn't say, I want to be able to digest spicy foods better, so I'm going to rearrange the connections to be able to do that. Whereas your brain can decide that you want to learn a language, or you want to be less emotionally reactive or more emotionally engaged, and you can undergo a series of steps that will allow your brain to make those changes so that eventually it becomes reflexive for you to do that, which is absolutely incredible. For a long time, it was thought that neuroplasticity was the unique gift of young animals and humans, that it could only occur when we're young. And in fact, the young brain is incredibly plastic. Children can learn 3 languages without an accent reflexively, whereas adults, it's very challenging. It takes a lot more effort and strain, a lot more of that duration path outcome kind of thinking in order to achieve those plastic changes. We now know, however, that the adult brain can change in response to experience. Nobel Prizes were given for the understanding that the young brain can change very dramatically. I think one of the most extreme examples would be for people that are born blind from birth. They use the area of their brain that normally would be used for visualizing objects and colors and things outside of them for Braille reading. In brain imaging studies, it's been shown that people who are blind from birth, when they Braille read, the area of the brain that would normally light up, if you will, for vision, lights up for Braille reading. So that real estate is reallocated for an entirely different function. If someone is made blind in adulthood, it's unlikely that their entire visual brain will be taken over by the areas of the brain that are responsible for touch. However, there's some evidence that areas of the brain that are involved in hearing and touch can kind of migrate into that area, and there's a lot of interest now in trying to figure out how more plasticity can be induced in adulthood, more positive plasticity. And in order to understand that process, we really have to understand something that might at first seem totally divorced from neuroplasticity, but actually lies at the center of neuroplasticity. And for any of you that are interested in changing your nervous system so that something that you want can go from being very hard or seem almost impossible and out of reach to being very reflexive, this is especially important to pay attention to. Plasticity in the adult human nervous system is gated, meaning it is controlled by neuromodulators. These things that we talked about earlier, dopamine, serotonin, and one in particular called acetylcholine, are what open up plasticity. They literally unveil plasticity and allow brief periods of time in which whatever information, whatever thing we're sensing or perceiving or thinking, or whatever emotions we feel, can literally be mapped in the brain such that later it will become much easier for us to experience and feel that thing. Now this has a dark side and a positive side. The dark side is it's actually very easy to get neuroplasticity as an adult through traumatic or terrible or challenging experiences. But the important question is to say, why is that? And the reason that's the case is because when something very bad happens, there's the release of two sets of neuromodulators in the brain. Epinephrine, which tends to make us feel alert and agitated, which is associated with most bad circumstances, and acetylcholine, which tends to create a even more intense and focused perceptual spotlight. Remember earlier we were talking about perception and how it's kind of like a spotlight. Acetylcholine makes that light particularly bright and particularly restricted to one region of our experience. And it does that by making certain neurons in our brain and body active much more than all the rest. So acetylcholine is sort of like a highlighter marker upon which neuroplasticity then comes in later and says, wait, which neurons were active in this particularly alerting phase of whatever day or night, whenever this thing happened to happen. So the way it works is this. You can think of epinephrine as creating this alertness and this kind of unbelievable level of increased attention compared to what you were experiencing before. And you can think of acetylcholine as being the molecule that highlights whatever happens during that period of heightened alertness. So just to be clear, it's epinephrine creates the alertness that's coming from a subset of neurons in the brainstem, if you're interested, and acetylcholine coming from an area of the forebrain is tagging or marking the neurons that are particularly active during this heightened level of alertness. Now that marks the cells, the neurons, and the synapses for strengthening, for becoming more likely to be active in the future, even without us thinking about it, okay? So in bad circumstances, this all happens without us having to do much. When we want something to happen, however, we want to learn a new language, we want to learn a new skill, we want to become more motivated. What do we know for certain? We know that process of getting neuroplasticity so that we have more focus, more motivation, absolutely requires the release of epinephrine. We have to have alertness in order to have focus. And we have to have focus in order to direct those plastic changes to particular parts of our nervous system. Now, this has immense implications in thinking about the various tools, whether or not those are chemical tools or machine tools or just self-induced regimens of how long or how intensely you're going to focus in order to get neuroplasticity. But there's another side to it. The dirty secret of neuroplasticity is that no neuroplasticity occurs during the thing you're trying to learn, during the terrible event, during the great event, during the thing that you're really trying to shape and learn. Nothing is actually changing between the neurons that is going to last. All the neuroplasticity, the strengthening of the synapses, the addition in some cases of new nerve cells, or at least connections between nerve cells, all of that occurs at a very different phase of life, which is when we are in sleep and non-sleep deep rest. And so neuroplasticity, which is the kind of holy grail of human experience of, this is the new year and everyone's thinking New Year's resolutions, and right now perhaps everything's organized and people are highly motivated, but what happens in March or April or May? Well, that all depends on how much attention and focus one can continually bring to whatever it is they're trying to learn. So much so that agitation and a feeling of strain are actually required for this process of neuroplasticity to get triggered. But the actual rewiring occurs during periods of sleep and non-sleep deep rest. There's a study published last year that's particularly relevant here that I want to share. It was not done by my laboratory, that showed that 20 minutes of deep rest, this is not deep sleep, but essentially doing something very hard and very intense and then taking 20 minutes immediately afterwards, to deliberately turn off the deliberate focused thinking and engagement actually accelerated neuroplasticity. There's another study that's just incredible, and we're going to go into this in a future episode of the podcast not too long from now, that showed that if people are learning a particular skill, it could be a language skill or a motor skill, and they hear a tone just playing in the background. The tone is playing periodically through the background, like just a bell. In deep sleep, if that bell is played, learning is much faster for the thing that they were learning while they were awake. It somehow cues the nervous system in sleep. It doesn't even have to be in dreaming. That something that happened in the waking phase was especially important, so much so that bell is sort of a Pavlovian cue. It's sort of a reminder to the sleeping brain, oh, you need to remember what it is that you were learning at that particular time of day. And the learning rates and the rates of retention, meaning how much people can remember from the thing they learned, are significantly higher under those conditions. So I'm going to talk about how to apply all this knowledge in a little bit more in this podcast episode, but also in future episodes. But it really speaks to the really key importance of sleep and focus, these two opposite ends of our attentional state. When we're in sleep, these DPOs, duration, path, and outcome analysis, are impossible. We just can't do that. We are only in relation to what's happening inside of us. So sleep is key. Also key are periods of non-sleep deep rest where we're turning off our analysis of duration, path, and outcome, in particular for the thing that we were just trying to learn. And we're in this kind of liminal state where our attention is kind of drifting all over. It turns out that's very important for the consolidation, for the changes between the nerve cells that will allow what we were trying to learn to go from being deliberate and hard and stressful and a strain to easy and reflexive. This also points to how different people, including many modern clinicians, are thinking about how to prevent bad circumstances, traumas, from routing their way into our nervous system permanently. It says that you might want to interfere with certain aspects of brain states that are away from the bad thing that happened, the brain states that happen the next day or the next month or the next year. And also I want to be aware, I want to make sure that I pay attention to the fact that for many of you, you're thinking about neuroplasticity not just in changing your nervous system to add something new, but to also get rid of things that you don't like, right? That you want to forget bad experiences, or at least remove the emotional contingency of a bad relationship, or a bad relationship to something or some person or some event. Learning to fear certain things less, to eliminate a phobia, to erase a trauma. The memories themselves don't get erased. I'm sorry to say that the memories don't themselves get erased, but the emotional load of memories can be reduced. And there are a number of different ways that can happen, but they all require this thing that we're calling neuroplasticity. We're going to have a large number of discussions about neuroplasticity in depth, but the most important thing to understand is that it is indeed a two-phase process. What governs the transition between alert and focused and these deep rest and deep sleep states is a system in our brain and body, a certain aspect of the nervous system called the autonomic nervous system. And it is immensely important to understand how this autonomic nervous system works. It has names like the sympathetic nervous system and parasympathetic nervous system, which frankly are complicated names because they're a little bit misleading. Sympathetic is the one that's associated with more alertness. Parasympathetic is the one that's associated with more calmness. And it gets really misleading because the sympathetic nervous system sounds like sympathy, and then people think it's related to calm. I'm going to call it the alertness system and the calmness system, because even though sympathetic and parasympathetic are sometimes used, people really get confused. So the way to think about the autonomic nervous system, and the reason it's important for every aspect of your life, but in particular for neuroplasticity and engaging in these focus states and then these defocus states, is that it works sort of like a seesaw. Every 24 hours, we're all familiar with the fact that when we wake up in the morning, we might be a little bit groggy, but then generally we're more alert. And then as evening comes around, we tend to become a little more relaxed and sleepy, and eventually at some point at night we go to sleep. So we go from alert to deeply calm. And as we do that, we go from an ability to engage in these very focused duration, path, outcome types of analyses to states in sleep that are completely divorced from duration, path, and outcome, in which everything is completely random and untethered in terms of our sensations, perceptions, and feelings, and so forth. So every 24 hours, we have a phase of our day that is optimal for thinking and focusing and learning and neuroplasticity and doing all sorts of things. We have energy as well. And at another phase of our day, we're tired and we have no ability to focus. We have no ability to engage in duration, path, outcome types of analyses. And it's interesting that both phases are important for shaping our nervous system in the ways that we want. So if we want to engage in neuroplasticity and we want to get the most out of our nervous system, we each have to master both the transition between wakefulness and sleep and the transition between sleep and wakefulness. Now, so much has been made of the importance of sleep, and it is critically important for wound healing, for learning, as I just mentioned, for consolidating learning, for all aspects of our immune system. It is the one period of time in which we're not doing these duration, path, and outcomes types of analyses, and it is critically important to all aspects of our health, including our longevity. Much less has been made, however, of how to get better at sleeping, how to get better at the process that involves falling asleep, staying asleep, and accessing these states of mind and body that involve total paralysis. Most people don't know this, but you're actually paralyzed during much of your sleep so that you can't act out your dreams, presumably. But also where your brain is in a total idle state where it's not controlling anything. It's just left to kind of free run. And there are certain things that we can all do in order to master that transition, in order to get better at sleeping. And it involves much more than just how much we sleep. We're all being told, of course, that we need to sleep more, but there's also the issue of sleep quality, accessing those deep states of non-DPO thinking, accessing the right timing of sleep. Not a lot has been discussed publicly, as far as I'm aware, of when to time your sleep. I think we all can appreciate that sleeping for half an hour throughout the day, so that you get a total of 8 hours of sleep every 24-hour cycle, is probably very different and not optimal compared to a solid block of 8 hours of sleep. Although there are people that have tried this. I think it's been written about in various books. Not many people can stick to that schedule. Incidentally, I think it's called the Uberman schedule, not to be confused with the Huberman schedule, because first of all, my schedule doesn't look anything like that, and second of all, I would never attempt such a sleeping regime. The other thing that is really important to understand is that we have not explored as a culture the rhythms that occur in our waking states. So much has been focused on the value of sleep and the importance of sleep, which is great, but I don't think that most people are paying attention to what's happening in their waking states and when their brain is optimized for focus, when their brain is optimized for these DPOs, these duration path outcome types of engagements for learning and for changing, and when their brain is probably better suited for more reflexive thinking and behaviors. And it turns out that there's a vast amount of scientific data which points to the existence of what are called ultradian rhythms. You may have heard of circadian rhythms. Circadian means circa, about a day, so it's 24-hour rhythms because the Earth spins once every 24 hours. Ultradian rhythms occur throughout the day, and they require less time. They're shorter. The most important ultradian rhythm, for sake of this discussion, is the 90-minute rhythm that we're going through all the time in our ability to attend and focus. And in sleep, our sleep is broken up into 90-minute segments. Early in the night, we have more phase 1 and phase 2 lighter sleep, and then we go into our deeper phase 3 and phase 4 sleep, and then we return to phase 1, 2, 3, 4. So all night you're going through these ultradian rhythms of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's repeating. Most people perhaps know that, maybe they don't, but when you wake up in the morning, these ultradian rhythms continue, and it turns out that we are optimized for focus and attention within these 90-minute cycles, so that at the beginning of one of these 90-minute cycles, maybe you sit down to learn something new or to engage in some new challenging behavior. For the first 5 or 10 minutes of one of those cycles, it's well known that the brain and the neural circuits and the neuromodulators are not going to be optimally tuned to whatever it is you're trying to do. But as you drop deeper into that 90-minute cycle, your ability to focus and to engage in this DPO process and to direct neuroplasticity and to learn is actually much greater. And then you eventually pop out of that at the end of the 90-minute cycle. So these cycles are occurring in sleep, and these cycles are occurring in wakefulness, and all of those are governed by this seesaw of alertness to calmness that we call the autonomic nervous system. So if you want to master and control your nervous system, regardless of what tool you reach to, whether or not it's a pharmacologic tool, or whether or not it's a behavioral tool, or whether or not it's a brain-machine interface tool, it's vitally important to understand that your entire existence is occurring in these 90-minute cycles, whether or not you're asleep or awake. And so you really need to learn how to wedge into those 90-minute cycles. And for instance, it would be completely crazy and counterproductive to try and just learn information while in deep sleep by listening to that information, because you're not able to access it. It would be perfectly good, however, to engage in a focused bout of learning each day, and now we know how long that focused bout of learning should be. It should be at least one 90-minute cycle, and the expectation should be that the early phase of that cycle is going to be challenging. It's going to hurt. It's not going to feel natural. It's not going to feel like flow. But that you can learn, and the circuits of your brain that are involved in focus and motivation can learn to drop into a mode of more focus, get more neuroplasticity, in other words, by engaging these ultradian cycles at the appropriate times of day. For instance, some people are very good learners early in the day and not so good in the afternoon. So you can start to explore this process even without any information about the underlying neurochemicals by simply paying attention, not just to when you go to sleep and when you wake up each morning, how deep or how shallow your sleep felt to you subjectively, but also throughout the day when your brain tends to be most anxious, because it turns out that has a correlate related to perception that we will talk about. You can ask yourself, when are you most focused? When are you least anxious? When do you feel most motivated? When you feel least motivated? By understanding how the different aspects of your perception, sensation, feeling, thought, and actions tend to want to be engaged or not want to be engaged, you develop a very good window into what's going to be required to shift your ability to focus or shift your ability to engage in creative type thinking at different times of day, should you choose. And so that's where we're heading going forward. It all starts with mastering this seesaw that is the autonomic nervous system, that at a coarse level is a transition between wakefulness and sleep. But at a finer level, and just as important, are the various cycles, these ultradian 90-minute cycles that govern our life all the time, 24 hours a day, every day of our life. And so we're going to talk about how you can take control of the autonomic nervous system so that you can better access neuroplasticity, better access sleep, even take advantage of the phase that is the transition between sleep and waking to access things like creativity and so forth. All based on studies that have been published over the last 100 years, mainly within the last 10 years, and some that are very, very new, and that point to the use of specific tools that will allow you to get the most out of your nervous system. So today we covered a lot of information. It was sort of a whirlwind tour of everything from neurons and synapses to neuroplasticity in the autonomic nervous system. We will revisit a lot of these themes going forward. So if all of that didn't sink in one pass, please don't worry. We will come back to these themes over and over again. I wanted to equip you with language that we're all developing a kind of common base set of information going forward. And I hope the information is valuable to you and you're thinking about what is working well for you and is what's working less well, and what's been exceedingly challenging, what's been easy for you in terms of your pursuit of particular behaviors or emotional states, where your challenges or the challenges of people that you know might reside. As promised in our welcome video, the format of the Huberman Lab podcast is to dive deep into individual topics for an entire month at a time. So for the entire month of January, we're going to explore this incredible state that is sleep and a related state, which is non-sleep deep rest, and what they do for things like learning, resetting our emotional capacity. Everyone's probably familiar with the fact that when we're sleep deprived, we're so much less good at dealing with life circumstances. We're more emotionally labile. Why is that? How is that? But most importantly, we're going to talk about how to get better at sleeping and then how to access better sleep, even when your sleep timing or duration is compromised. We're also going to talk about the data that support this very interesting state called non-sleep deep rest, where one is neither asleep nor awake, but it turns out one can recover some of the neuromodulators and, more importantly, the processes involved in sensation, perception, feeling, thought, and action. It's sure to be a very rich discussion back and forth where I'm answering your questions and providing tools. And I'm certain you're also going to learn a lot of information about neuroscience and what makes up this incredible phase of your life where you think you're not conscious, but you're actually resetting and renewing yourself in order to perform better, feel better, etc. in the waking state. If you want to support the podcast, please click the like button and subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a comment if you have any feedback for us. And on Apple, you can also leave a review and comments for us to improve the podcast experience for you. Please also check out our sponsors, and thank you so much, and we'll see you on the next episode next week.
Welcome back, Ed. Good to see you again, man.
Thank you for having me back.
Well, I'm happy you're back, but I'm not happy that there was a motivation to bring you back based on the violence. You know, the violence that is going on between the cartels, and it was the Mormons, and then we were just talking about this other person that got shot because they ran. Would you explain that again? They ran a cartel roadblock.
Yeah, basically in Tamaulipas, a lot of the cartel groups actually they build their roadblocks on the state and local roads. And according to what I've heard from some of the people that I know there, this family ran one of those roadblocks. They didn't know if it was cops or not, and they apparently decided to run the roadblock, and the cartel guys shot them.
What should someone do if they encounter a cartel roadblock?
Slow down. I mean, if anything, I would probably avoid traveling through those areas. That's the number one avoidance. Usually, you know, and I've actually gone through some of those myself.
Really?
Yeah. And it's all about they're looking out for rivals moving through their territory. They're looking for government personnel maybe spying on them, and usually they'll just shake you down for some money and they'll let you go on your way, unless you have a 4x4 truck they can use for their own purposes, which is
they might take your truck.
Yeah, specifically in Tamaulipas, 4x4 trucks are a commodity for them. They use them for their ongoing turf war.
Oh, right. Especially someone else's. They don't mind getting shot up.
Yeah. I mean, most of the trucks that you see that are up armored or they have the rifles on top are usually stolen vehicles. All of them are stolen vehicles, and a lot of them are, Americans crossing into Mexico. Some of them are Americans crossing into Mexico and just getting the truck stolen.
Jesus Christ, that's a real common thing?
It's starting to be pretty common. I recently saw a case of an apparent abduction in Tamaulipas. You see the video and the cartel guys come out of the car, They grab the owner of a pickup truck. They get him out of the car. They take his cell phone, leave it on the sidewalk because they're aware of all the SOS technology, and they take him inside of another car, and they take the truck. And you thought, you would think, it's because he did something or he's involved in something. They let him go a few blocks later and just took the truck. It was all about the truck.
Wow.
Yeah, it's resources. They're just acquiring resources for their war, basically.
Nice of them to let him go.
Nice of them to let him go. It's not always the case. It's not always the case, but it's pretty.
I think most people in America are just now waking up to the chaos that's going on down there. I think that the Mormon assassination was a real wake-up call, but I think people are paying much more attention now. I mean, we talked about this. When was the last time you were on? It was like 5 months?
Yeah.
Something like that?
A lot of the stuff we talked about those 5 months ago that's how things progressed. We actually did mention the Mormon communities down there, which was kind of eerie.
Yeah.
And we talked about the possible designation of cartels as terror groups.
Yeah, you had an interesting take on that. So Trump was saying that they were going to designate them as terrorist groups and that they were going to have military action against them.
Yeah.
And then there was some sort of negotiation with the president of Mexico. What do you think went down there?
So, I mean, this is just, from what I see and from how things traditionally happen down there. Mexico's currently has currently a leftist president down there. He's very to the left, so much to the left that he recently gave Evo Morales, the deposed leftist president of Bolivia, asylum in the country. And there's been a lot of pro-left political stuff going on in Mexico, basically. As soon as the designation threat by the U.S. came down, there was some sort of negotiation, and a lot of things happened after some U.S. officials went down there and talked to the government. Among them, Evo Morales is out. He went to Cuba, apparently, and then went to Argentina, so he's not going to stay in Mexico. Former head of public security under the Calderon administration, which is 2 administrations past. The President Calderon is the one that started the drug war. He was arrested for cartel involvement and basically receiving money from the cartels.
I saw that, yeah.
He was going through his immigration process, and he was actually asking for full citizenship, and they got him on lying through the immigration authorities. He said that he never received money from the cartels, and apparently he did a lot of it. Right. So all these things happened after they walked back the threat of designating cartels as a terrorist organization.
So there has been some action. So they must have made some negotiation where Trump had said, "Listen, we're going to do this," and he said, "Hold up, let's talk."
Yeah, I mean, a main thing is one of the things that this current president, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, ran on was creating a national police force, right? A National Guard is what he calls it, which had already kind of been done before, but, change the name, change the uniform, change the packaging, and it's a new thing, right? He wanted the army out of the drug war because the casualties were mounting on both sides, and he said it wasn't it shouldn't be a military operation. And he ran on a platform that was called Abrazos, no balazos, which means hugs, not bullets, right? So basically,
Jesus Christ.
Amnesty for the cartels was basically kind of the main theme of that. So he got into power. The first thing he did, militarize police forces and create a National Guard, and tried to dissolve the federal police. And most of that National Guard force was designated to border patrol duties on the Mexican side. So some of them went to the south of the border, southern Mexican border, and some of them went to the northern Mexican border, basically to stem the whole illegal immigration crisis with the caravans. That's what kind of happened, and it was a kind of a collaboration between the U.S. and the Mexican government. So that was one of the key points of collaboration that they had. And when this whole designation thing went up, that was kind of like a bargaining chip that the Mexican government had with the U.S. and the rest of the things that kind of transpired afterwards. It's pretty interesting how a lot of things happened after that meeting down there, and how they walked back the terrorist designation.
So the terrorist designation would mean that Trump would have some sort of incentive to invade Mexico.
Well, it would open up the possibility for direct military action against
strikes.
Drone strikes without permission of the nation that these strikes were going to take place. Also targeting finances, or anything related to cartel activities would be targeted.
Well, yeah, where do the cartels keep their cash?
Well, it's right now it's a myriad of things. They diversified long ago, so it's not like they're keeping buried cash in a container somewhere in the jungle like Escobar used to do, right?
Right.
They're still finding some like rotted cash from the 80s. They're putting their money in cryptocurrency. They're diversifying their investments in actual companies, like legit companies, so they're cleaning their money that way. Real estate, hotels, property on the U.S. side, so they're also investing on the U.S. side of the border as well. So money's it's not under the mattress or giant stacks of cash in a room somewhere.
What kind of banks do business with the cartels? Well, how do they negotiate that?
I'm not going to say names, but there's been a few cases of pretty large banks that have been involved in money laundering for the cartels recently. People can look that up easily. But you would think you would have you would have cartels designated as terrorists, so now there are banks involved in funding terrorism. So that would change things. That's there's a lot of things that would happen. Some of these consequences. People talk about designate him as a terrorist and send drones down there. Things that they kind of don't talk about is that if a terrorist designation does happen, most people seeking asylum in the U.S. from Mexico now have the claim of running from terrorists in Mexico. So now they can claim that as far as asylum seeking people can claim that now. It's a different thing. The main argument that a lot of people say is that cartels can't be considered a terrorist group because they don't have political aspirations. The problem with that theory is that we have a lot of political killings by cartels in Mexico where they shoot the candidate of one side of the political spectrum because it's not good for them. So they influence politics. They also pay off a lot of politicians down there. And they also, examples of the new generation cartel from Guadalajara giving out Christmas gifts or groceries to the poor, basically doing hearts and minds type tactics in the area, are clear political movements, right?
Yeah.
So,
why is terrorism connected to politics?
Well, that's classical. The classical definition of that is of a terrorist group. That's what they're basing it on. I think the cartels and narco-terrorism is a thing in and of itself. It's a new phenomenon. Terrorism should be reclassified to include it, I think. Most people that live through that type of situation in that type of area in the country facing some of these cartel threats that have fled it, we'll call it what it is.
Yeah.
It's terrorism.
Terrorism. They're terrified.
Yeah.
I mean, that's literally, who's more terrifying than the cartels?
Yeah. Well.
So what's going on with the Mormons now? Are they moving out of there now? Are they going to go back to Utah and just take one wife? That's what it all started out with, right?
Yeah, well, they're a fundamentalist group, and they went down there and kind of proceeded with their customs. I'm in contact with a few of the members of that family, and I was in contact before, but when I went on here, they kind of one of them reached out, like, hey, what's going on? So,
help us out. What do we need to do?
Yeah, and then, it was like a friendly hello from them, from past interactions, and then this happened. And, I kind of advised a little bit, but that's, it's a mess. A lot of them are leaving the communities down there. There's a lot of them down there, a lot of communities in Sonora, Coahuila, and they're leaving the area. It's just too dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah, it only makes sense. I mean, they just don't have the arms. They don't have the tactics, manpower.
And they're also in the middle of one of the most important regions in Mexico right now, for a lot of reasons. The main thing is, there's two things that are really, really kind of happening in that region. One, the trafficking of fentanyl and heroin and all these drugs through one of the main drug routes up into the U.S. And there's a few factions fighting over that region. Los Salazar, which are a small cartel faction that has allegiances to the Sinaloa cartel, and the Línea cartel, which has historically been in control of Ciudad Juarez. So they're both kind of vying for control of the area. A few hours before the massacre actually took place, there were a bunch of firefights between these two factions in the area. So one of the main theories is that this group of Mormons basically were a case of mistaken identity, kind of driving into some of the areas where they're being protected by some of these people. That's one theory, right? The other thing that people kind of need to think about is that the largest mineable deposits of lithium on the planet right now are a few hours away from where that massacre took place.
Really?
Yes, and that is, not conspiracy theorizing here, but it's a pretty important thing in that region. And there's a lot of interest in that space and control for that space.
And they're not mining it currently?
There's a bunch of projects in play right now.
So they've identified the deposits.
Yeah, people can look up the numbers, but it's the largest mineable deposit of lithium on the planet.
Whoa.
And there was some sort of deal in the past where a Canadian mining agency was going to have rights to it, and the mining agency was bought by a Chinese company. So, again, after that massacre, a lot of things happened, a lot of the negotiations happened. That deal was one of the things that got killed after that situation.
Oh, no.
Right, so it's an interesting area. There's a lot of things happening there.
That's got to put a tremendous amount of pressure on the cartels in some way, right?
Well, historically, any sort of mining operation usually has industry around it, which is perfect for the cartels. Extortion, protection rackets, feeding the drug use in the area from the workers. That's.
Is there any way that you could see in the future the cartels being extracted from the positions of power that they're in now? I mean, or is this something that people in Mexico are going to have to live with forever, and I guess people in the United States as well? Or is this something that can be fixed? You've talked about before in some of your podcasts, and I listen to them a lot. It's a great podcast. One of my favorite. Great when you're on too. Thank you. But you talk about legalization and how that would help. That definitely is part of the solution. And it is. It is definitely part of the solution, legalizing some drugs. Not all drugs are made the same. Maybe not fentanyl, but that would help out some things. There's multiple things that could be done to guide us towards a place where things could stabilize down there. And a lot of it is not going to be able to be done in Mexico. It's going to have to be done up here, right? Basically, you have to take care of, the U.S. has to take care of the drug market up here, the illegal drug market. And certain things that have happened, like legalization of marijuana in some places up here, have changed the dynamics of what happens down there. Some for the better, some bad things have happened. Talking to my friend John Norris, who was on here as well, and comparing notes, seeing how a lot of the drug grows that are up here, the illegal pot grows that are up here, exactly like the ones that I found in Baja 6-7 years ago, and how some of that drug money made from those fields is staying in the U.S. It's not being sent back. So that means you have an active, growing cartel presence in the U.S. that is U.S. based. So I think that one of the problems that people have is perception is that that's a Mexican problem. It's a U.S.-Mexico problem. You have a border there, but the problem has two root causes, right? Social, economic inequality, and destabilization and corrupt government down there, and a thriving illegal drug market up here. And those two have to be solved in a combined way. How many members, when you combine all the cartels, how many members are we talking about?
It's pretty hard to put a number on how. I will say this:
more than 1 million.
I will say this: they defeated the Mexican army in Sinaloa.
Yeah, that was bananas.
Yeah.
When they captured El Chapo's son.
Yeah.
And then the army gave it back.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, you can have him back.
Well,
sorry.
That whole situation, and it was like, I remember that was happening, and I was getting asked questions about it, and it was live. It was all of a sudden just popped off, you know. Basically, supposedly, the official story from the Mexican government is that they send a special police unit to capture him, right? Which is completely false, I think, because you don't send 35 agents to capture one of the heads of one of the biggest Sinaloa cartel cells, right? So it's pretty much by chance they spotted this party. People were armed there. They went there. All of a sudden, El Chapo's son is there.
So you think they just stumbled into him?
I posted a video on my feed of the capture of El Chapo's son. You can see it, and you can see the surprise and really how the agents are kind of uncomfortable or are fearful of what they just stumbled in on. Imagine U.S. agents stumbling on one of the America's most wanted individuals up here. They're going to put him on the ground. They're going to handcuff him. In the video, you can see that they point their rifles at him, and he calmly takes out his gun and hands it to somebody inside of the house he was in, and walks out and kind of tries to negotiate with the people outside, the federal agents that are trying to arrest him. And you can see that the agents are like, "Oh, what did we stumble in on?" Oh. Right? So that happened. They grabbed him. They reported back to Mexico. They captured him. They started to announce the capture. And his brother, his half-brother Archibaldo, basically called in all of the reinforcements from all surrounding towns and regions in Sinaloa. And it was flooded with a bunch of armed cartel guys. All of Sinaloa was.
Wasn't there a video of the government people and the cartel people talking?
Yeah, there's it's on my feed. You can see it if you want. It's basically an army unit that was being sent to reinforce security in Culiacan, being surrounded by cartel members.
Yeah, is this it right here?
Yeah, that's it. Obviously, the guys running around with a vest and wearing skinny jeans are some of the Sinaloa cartel members.
And they just talk it through.
I mean, they're outnumbered, and also there's talk about there's a specific community out there in Sinaloa where all the army families members live, and they were apparently being held hostage by cartel guys as a bargaining chip. So
all these guys that we're seeing here, they're dressed in civilian clothes with the vests. Those are all cartel guys.
Those are all cartel guys.
Jesus Christ!
And they're
shaking hands with everybody.
Well, you know,
hey, what's up, homie?
I mean, again, we go back into the whole what is the fight they have in them, right? Mm-hmm. The Sinaloa cartel was basically surrounding some of their communities and holding their family members hostage. So that went out over the radio. So as an army member going in to fight the cartel, so you know what? I'm out of this fight.
Yeah.
So they raise their hands.
So then they release the hostages. Everybody backs out. Yeah.
I mean, they defeated the Mexican government, basically. Anything that went up against, you know, they surrounded the city. Usually you'll see classic Mexican cartel activity. They close off the streets going into the city by burning semis and trailers and stuff like that. So you would see all these burning semi-trailers in the region. So if you want to move in, you can't. And if you want to use your helicopters, the cartels have anti-aircraft capabilities. So they broke out a bunch of people from the prison, just taking advantage of the whole chaos. You can see there's a few other videos where there's armored trucks with 50 cals and Modus on the back of them, just moving around the city. There's no way you can. This is a breakout state prison. You know, took advantage of the whole chaos and just, you know, let's break some of our friends out. Right? So just pure chaos. Eventually, the government decided to let him go. That's the official story. But according to the people there was no government saying let him go. There was like the guys holding him and said, you know what, it's not worth it. Yeah, that's one of the technicals, as they call them up here. Yeah, dump trucks, they armor plate the sides and put somebody out.
Imagine being a person living there. Well, that's what I'm trying to picture. Like, what life is like for the civilians.
And most of these videos are all done by civilians, so there's a certain normalcy in some of these cases, especially in Sinaloa. It's part of it's part of the culture there. And as far as sides go, hey, the army's coming to save us. That's not usually what some people in some of these communities think, because the cartels those are the guys in charge.
So has Sinaloa always been like that? Like, how long has
Sinaloa has traditionally been a cradle for like the origins of some of the more successful cartel heads, right?
Isn't that where Julio Cesar Chavez is from?
Yeah, he is. Yeah, and lots of anybody in Sinaloa has some sort of relationship to the cartels because they're part of culture there. There's just no way getting around it. Had a surreal experience once when I went there. I did a class out there, and was running down this bumpy road, and then all of a sudden, just flat, beautiful road. Oh yeah, this is the cartel part of the road that they built. It's like, okay.
Wow. So it's like sort of like the mob in Vegas in like the 50s and 60s.
Exactly, but it's now, and they're
way more hardcore.
Some of their they have a Jardines de Lumaya is the narco cemetery they have, and it's basically luxury condos. They look like, I went there, I thought it was a church, and it turned out to be a tomb.
Wow.
Right, so the opulence and the money there is just overt, and how they move around. They roll around in vehicles with guns, and nobody does anything because they own the city.
What are they planning on doing? Does anybody have any plans, or is it just they're just accepting this?
Well, you get a lot of rhetoric about collaboration. Yeah, that's Jardines de Lumaya. All of those are graves. Some of them have CCTV video inside, air conditioning, alarms.
Those are graves.
Those are grave sites. And the cartel guys' heads go there and on the Day of the Dead, have music, live bands, shoot their AKs into the air. Nobody does anything.
Wow. Jesus Christ, this is crazy.
Yeah, the opulence is amazing. Just seeing it, it's like having several Escobars in one place. It's not, it's like a lot of cartels heads are from that region, and a lot of their kids grew up in that, and the opulence is amazing.
Fuck. Like, is this gonna grow?
I think it is. I don't think it is. It is growing. Again, going back to my friend John Norris and seeing his experiences up here, finding all these illegal drug grows in public lands. It's growing. It's growing over here too.
Yeah.
So
roots.
Yeah. So the thing that a lot of people have to think about: a lot of these cartel guys had their kids up here. So they made their money down there, and they sent their wives up here. And a lot of these kids that were born in the late 80s, early 90s are coming of age up here with that cartel pedigree. So, and they're U.S. citizens, U.S. passport. So you're gonna see some sort of shift. And they're coming of age. You'll get experience. You get a handoff of reins from the older generation to the newer generation, and you're going to see it's definitely growing.
It seems so crazy to watch because it seems like it's not discussed nearly enough, and it seems like if it keeps getting stronger, like what we saw with El Chapo's son being released, like what's to stop it from taking over Mexico entirely?
Well, you would have people arguing that it already has in different ways. So I think another thing that people have to figure out and realize is that there's factions in the Mexican government. So you will see a federal government that apparently is being paid off by a very specific large cartel group. And then you'll see state governments that are a different political party influenced, paying off by other cartel groups. So you'll see, military units moving on the town and the state police blocking their way to get in there because they play for different teams, right?
Whoa.
There's a lot of talk right now about Felipe Calderon's tenure and how his head of public safety was on the payroll of the Sinaloa cartel, which actually came out during El Chapo's trial. So now you're talking about basically a federal police force that was on El Chapo's side. So he had free reign to grow and do whatever he had to do in that region with the support of the federal government in a way. So technically, who's in control of some regions? And realistically, some regions of Mexico are completely in cartel control.
Now, we discussed this on the last podcast, but let's give people a little, just a recap of this, just so people can understand your position. When you first started working with the Mexican government with this, it wasn't like it is now. Give everybody just a rundown of how it went down.
So I went to work for state government down in Mexico, in Baja specifically, and
this was
2004, right before the official start of the kickoff of the drug war as the kickoff. But there was the official start was when Felipe Calderon came into office and said, you know what, gloves off, we're gonna go after the organized crime, right? We're going to send the military onto the streets, and they're going to spearhead operations against the cartels. But before that, things were happening still. Sinaloa cartel was growing. There was a rift between the Sinaloa cartel and Tijuana cartel. Fragmentation. Cartel heads were being killed, and one cartel turned into three. All this fragmentation. And then, they basically militarized the war on drugs with Calderon. Came in, militarized the war on drugs. Immediately you start seeing that drug enforcement efforts were being put towards a single or a group of cartel groups, but not a major one like the Sinaloa cartel. So you start seeing how they were basically taking sides.
They were breaking up the competition.
That's what you would gather from
making it look like progress.
Yeah. And also El Chapo has been built up into this mythical figure, like he was the head of the Sinaloa cartel, he's the main guy. That's not true at all. He was an operator for the Sinaloa cartel, but not the main operator. There's different theories and about who was actually in charge or the brain behind the whole operation. When you say Sinaloa cartel, it's not one group. It's several. It's a federation of several criminal groups, enterprises uniting and working in conjunction to put drugs into the United States. Well, one of the things they do is put drugs into the United States. They do a lot of things, but that's one of the things they do. So, certain people, there's a lot of people out there that theorize that Mayo Zambada, which is El Chapo's compadre, who's still out there, is the actual head of the Sinaloa cartel and has been since the start. But you see how some of these people become celebrities, and as soon as somebody becomes a celebrity like El Chapo, who escaped from custody a few times, under pretty interesting situations. He's pretty interesting situations. Now the government has a celebrity they can go after, so they can point at that guy. That guy's a bad guy, right? So you saw a lot of that, a lot of theatrics around him, as far as him being the head of whatever group or operation was. But at the same time, you start seeing the DEA and the U.S. government condecorating and putting all these awards on a guy like Luna, who was the guy that got arrested recently, who was head of security down in Mexico. And now all of a sudden he's not. He was recognized by the U.S. government as being a player for the good guys, and now he's arrested. So you start seeing all these, different interests, different political kind of movements around the drug war and what that turned into. And you don't know what to think, right? Each U.S. administration has changed the way they do things when it comes to the drug war, and it also benefits certain groups down there. So who knows? Realistically,
fuck.
Yeah,
it's just I went to Chichen Itza, I think in 2002, maybe 2003, somewhere around that time, and there was no concern.
Yeah, it's a different time.
But that's 16, 17 years ago. That's so recent in terms of human history.
Yeah,
that a region changes so radically, so quickly.
Well, there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of interest. China has a lot of interest in Mexico, and you go back and you see some things like the. I'm sorry. You see things like the whole how some armed groups started popping up in Mexico in the Michoacan area, fighting back against the cartels. The whole, there was like a series, like a documentary on them, the autodefensas they were called, basically like vigilante groups. And then later on you realize that they were all fighting for basically protecting or working around security for illegal Chinese ore mining in the area.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was all about Chinese ore mining, iron ore mining, illegal Chinese ore mining.
So the Chinese ore miners, they just made a deal.
Yeah, and then, we can get in on it, so let's arm all these guys, and we're protecting our communities, but there was a lot of that going on, not all of them, but there was a lot of shady stuff going on in the region when it comes to that. Now you see things like the stuff that's going on in Sonora, and there's a lot of lithium there. That's pretty valuable thing, Yeah.
Sonora is a place that a lot of hunters go.
Yeah.
Sonora has these big hunting ranches, and it's famous for giant mule deer.
Yeah. I've been out there hunting myself, and it's a beautiful part of Mexico.
But that seems like a sketchy spot to venturing into.
It's perfect because it's perfect for them because it's rural, so there's nobody around.
But if you were like a guy from Texas wanting to drive your truck down there to a little hunting,
I mean, my recommendation is this: if you have a 4x4, don't take it down there.
Take a fucking Yugo.
We do have the largest population of American citizens living outside of the country in Mexico for some reason. So
really,
yeah.
In all throughout Mexico?
Yeah, I mean all throughout Mexico.
Well, it's fun down there. Well, a lot of people like Cabo. People love Mexican food.
Yeah. There's a certain chaotic freedom in Mexico, which being a child of Mexico and then moving up here and seeing you guys talk about freedom, not that free. But there's I get the draw, and some of these communities down there are pretty safe, but some aren't,
They're safe until they're not safe.
And safe until they all of a sudden you're in the middle of some place that's going to be disputed, which I think is something along the lines of what happened to some of these Mormon communities down there. You're in the middle. Your community and your movements are in the middle of our route. Could you please get out of the way?
What's the ceiling on this? Like, if they can continue to grow, I mean, it's really. Is it possible that we're looking at a country that might be completely run and overrun by criminal organizations and drug sellers?
Some parts of it are already. Yeah. So what I think is going to happen is you'll see escalations. A clear sign or a clear group that is like a sign of things to come is the New Generation Cartel. The New Generation Cartel is a cartel that was it used to be called Los Matacetas. It was basically an armed enforcing group that Sinaloa cartel made to go after their main rivals, the Zetas, which were originally members of Mexican special forces that said, you know what, we're going to be cartel guys now, and cartel enforcers now. So they whole sordid history. It was a militarized group that was formed to go after them, right? And their whole kind of play was that we're going to be against extortion, against abducting people, against affecting the community. We're going to enforce the law in our communities, but we're also going to move drugs through here, right? But that's kind of their thing. So you see this group start kind of growing in the region, and right now it's pretty big. It's rivaling the Sinaloa cartel as far as power and reach. But the way they do their things is militarized. It's very militaristic, kind of paramilitary, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of the FARC groups in Colombia. Hearts and minds, they go into the communities, the community policing in the area. They originally said, we're aware the government wants to fight drugs here in the region. We agree with their fight, but we are also going to fight against these guys that are affecting the community as well. And they have like groups of people. They have training camps, militaristic training camps, where they recruit people. They take them there, and they're being trained in guerrilla warfare and shooting. And apparently, there's some SF guys from the U.S. that advise them. So that's the next thing. The escalation of a simple ragtag group of cartel guys enforcing the region to an actual cohesive paramilitary group now trying to vie for control, not just of the drug routes, but also of the populace and the confidence that the populace has in them. So it could turn political at some point. Right?
It just seems like it's the genie's out of the bottle.
It is. I mean, it is. I mean, it is in a lot of ways. And going after it just as a drug enforcement issue is not.
It's so much bigger than that.
Yeah, it's cultural. It's economic. Some of these kids. I posted up some of these cartel soldier kids at 12 years old.
Gold-plated guns.
Gold-plated guns. They don't have options in their life.
Right.
It's that or nothing.
Right. So it's either awesome life or
short awesome
extreme
life.
Poverty.
Short awesome life.
Yeah. Or short awesome life or extreme poverty.
So that's one component to it. Another component is systemic corruption as a society from who knows when. It's always been a thing in Mexico. People that grew up down there, you get stopped at a red light and you're like, can I pay the fine here? People that are from down there will be aware of this. Yeah, show the paperwork, you slide that thing in there, That's part of the culture. That's affecting a lot of things as well. People don't pay attention to the small rules, so the big rules don't matter, right? And just being next to the largest drug market on the planet, and having money, firearms, rounds going down, and fentanyl that's being fabricated in Mexico now, and some of the Chinese fentanyl making its way through into the U.S., kind of filling the voids that some of the drug market has right now. So they're making fake fentanyl-laced pills that are being put into the U.S. and fentanyl-laced heroin, right? So that's where they're going towards now. That's why you see this epidemic up here. And a lot of things traditionally kind of focused on pot before it was legalized in a lot of regions up here now is heroin and fentanyl.
So it's actually kind of accelerated the production of the more harmful and dangerous drugs.
In some ways, yes. I mean, they had to find another. It went pot, meth, and now fentanyl-laced heroin or fentanyl-laced pills.
See, and the problem with the idea of legalization is that if you tried to be the person who says, hey, folks, we need to legalize drugs here in America because we've got this problem with the cartels, politically that's suicide.
Yeah.
No one, I mean, even though it's probably right.
It is, I think it is very right.
It's one of those things that's so counterintuitive that most people are going to go, you're crazy, you're going to make my kids hooked on drugs?
Well, I'll say this, I fought in the drug war, literally a drug war veteran,
yes.
And if I had a white flag, I would hand it over to you. It's like it's a useless fight. I got to destroy pot fields. Realistically, thinking about all the effort and all the blood, I'm like, it's just pot.
Yeah, and it's so quick to grow back. I mean,
it is a fruitless fight. Fentanyl, heroin, maybe different drugs.
Fentanyl in particular is.
But a lot of that fentanyl is coming from China. Mm-hmm. It's not a Mexican thing.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of the people that are making or producing fentanyl in places like Mexico are from China, setting up laboratories in Mexico. So it's a Chinese-Mexican U.S. problem as well.
God damn. What can be done? Other than the legalization, what can be done? I mean, how does... Unless the United States literally goes to war with the Mexican cartels, and you made a face talking about that.
I mean, I'd say designation is one. I think designation it's going to happen.
A terrorist designation.
It's going to happen. I mean, again, we just saw the massacre of Mexican. They were dual citizenship. 9 people, kids, women. It's not uncommon for that to happen to Mexican nationals. It's pretty uncommon for that to happen to American nationals down there. And that woke up a bunch of people, Mm-hmm. And now another recent murder of another American national, kid with his parents down there. People will say, but just don't go down to Mexico. But some of these people, live down there, have family down there, have communities down there. And it's just ultra violent. People have to wake up on this side to realize this problem is not going to get any better. This problem is not just a Mexican problem, it's a U.S.-Mexican problem. And, it'll get to a point where it's going to be, I think in my lifetime there's going to be some sort of armed intervention in Mexico at some point.
Really? So you anticipate almost like in a civil war?
I think something's going to happen in Mexico that's going to destabilize it so much that the U.S. won't have another option but to put boots on the ground, probably. I think that's where we're headed. The problem, and again, another of the problems is that the government is part of the problem. So you can go down there and negotiate with this government, but 6 years later, it's going to be another government.
And you got to renegotiate with them.
Yeah, and also
with new palm grease.
Yeah, and then you put all your faith in the military, and the military gets compromised. You put all the faith in the Mexican Marines, and then they get compromised. And now who do you have, right? So it's systemic.
Don't tell that to Trump. He'll use that as an excuse. We can't count on them. We're going in. I mean, I wonder where it all goes, because it is obviously growing very fast. It's obviously huge and incredibly powerful.
And it affects. I mean, I'm up here now, and I could see the effects of it up here. Walking through LA, seeing all the needles on the ground. Going to Seattle, seeing the same light brown fentanyl lace heroin that I saw in shanty towns down in Baja. It's like, wow, so this is where it kind of ends up.
Yeah.
So you see the effects of it throughout. So you realize quickly, as somebody from both sides that I am, you realize that there's kind of no border when it comes to this problem. This problem doesn't respect a border wall.
Right.
Right. Submarines will go around it. Tunnels will go under it. Drones will fly over it. And it's a problem that just keeps producing an effect.
And I think the majority of the United States citizens are completely unaware of the complexity and the depth of the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it is. Well, it's also. I think most people seeing the Iran thing right now. Most people know more about that.
Oh yeah.
Going on halfway across the world.
Yeah.
Than what's going on just a few hours.
That's what's crazy to me. It's like we're into invading countries that are really barely affecting us. They're like a 17-hour plane flight.
Yeah, I think the I don't know. Again, I don't want to be Ed Adamas and predict stuff.
Ed Adamas.
But the fact that we have a lot of lithium in Sonora is going to be a factor for
a reason to clean it up.
It should be.
It should be.
It's pretty important. It's a pretty important resource.
Yeah, but if they can't hold on to El Chapo's son,
that's why I think U.S. is going to have to put boots on the ground down there.
Wow. Now, if you had to make a bet, like if there's a betting line in Vegas, like how many days or how many years from now will there be American soldiers deployed to Mexico?
I don't know. I'd say 5 years, maybe.
Whoa.
In 5 years.
Really?
I mean, we are on. We just passed this past year has been the most violent year in Mexico in recorded history.
Really?
And it's the first year of administration of this new president, right, who's been trying to...
Hugs,
not bullets. Abrazos, no balazos, this instead of that. It's been his first year, and, hey, give him a chance. He's doing whatever he needs.
It's only the most violent year in history.
Yeah.
Cut the guy a break.
Exactly. That's what they say, but then I go down there, and I have a lot of my friends that are still down there, people that have trained still down there, and I hear from them directly. Like I have some young kids that are in the Gendarmeria, which is like a federal police force that patrols all of Mexico. And some of the federal police guys, they tell me like, Ed, they said, or you signed the new contract to be the Guardia Nacional and lower your pay and all of the stuff that all your benefits will be gone. Or you just stay on here in limbo and just stay at the base. And a lot of them are staying at the base, so it's nothing's being done.
Well, I imagine that if it seems overwhelming and it seems helpless and it seems like the cartels are just taking over and they're making a shitload of money and you're not making any money. I mean, that is the real crazy thing about it, right? If the government is asking people in this sort of already compromised situation, environment, asking them to work for a small amount of money to go after people that are making a tremendous amount of money.
Yeah.
And you're going to be at war with these people, and these people, they're basically your neighbors.
Yeah, and also you go there with a federal uniform, as part of the federal government, you go into a community where the federal government doesn't do anything for them.
Right.
The church is made by the cartels.
Cartel made the road.
Christmas was brought to you by the cartels. You know, they are the good guys. So these guys come in here like, who are these guys? Like, what are they doing here? We're not gonna. So that's, you know, it's a mess. It's a mess.
Wow. But could boots on the ground actually fix anything?
I mean, I'm not a military expert, but there has to be some sort of outside force that is completely uncompromised by cartel money and influence.
How long before they compromise those people?
Well, when you put the Marines on the border, a few of them got picked up on smuggling people from the border. So
yeah, that's what I'm saying.
You know, who knows? It's a different war field because a lot of our war fighters and law enforcement have some sort of blood ties to Mexico.
Of course. Well, not only that, I was just watching some video where there was this guy who is a U.S. veteran, been deployed overseas, fought for this country, and his mom was getting deported. And he said he felt betrayed. Like, here he is in America. His mother brought him over here, had him over here. He's a U.S. citizen, and they're deporting his mom. His mom is a danger or a problem.
There's a community of Army, Marine, and several veterans that are deported veterans that live in places like Tijuana.
That's fucking crazy. That is fucking crazy. You fight for the country, man.
You get a DUI and you're...
But how nuts is that?
It is pretty nuts.
It's fucking ridiculous. You fight for this country. You literally risk your life. And there's assholes out there that haven't done a goddamn thing, been mooching off the system forever, and they're citizens, and you're not?
Yeah. I mean, my perspective and my life path, you know, when I came up here, I want to earn it, right? I don't know. I came up here motivated, want to do a difference, work. And apparently, you know, I've had some, you know, static in my endeavors. My kid was born in the U.S. and parented. Her mom's American, right? When I went to the hospital to pay for the insurance part of it, they laughed at me and said, "You shouldn't pay any of this. You're Mexican. You just can claim benefits." Right? That was in California. So I was like, oh, but I can afford it. No, you should there's ways around this, you know? And that's when I knew, you know, there's America and there's California America, right?
California America is different?
Yeah, California America is very different.
It's a subtle blend?
Oh, I mean, there's ways around stuff, you know, there's free stuff, you know, get at it, you know, it's a weird, you know, again, I travel across the country and just get to experience different parts of the U.S. You know, I spent New Year's in Kentucky, and that's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I like it, you know, maybe it's like a white Mexico.
Is it?
Yeah.
How so?
People were shooting guns into the air on New Year's Eve. That's pretty Mexican, you know.
They do that in Texas too.
Oh, well, you know, again, you know, I don't know.
It's not good. Some lady got shot.
Oh, it's completely irresponsible.
Standing in her driveway, a grandma with her family, and the bullet fell out of the sky and hit her in the chest.
Yeah, when New Year would come, we would park underneath the bridges in Baja to not get, you know, there's firearms are legal in Mexico, and then, you know, you see tracer rounds just going off.
Oh my god!
You're like,
tracer rounds.
Okay, you know. It's again, Mexico is a weird place. You know, that's why I call it the upside down. You know, there's a chaotic freedom to Mexico, which I get. I mean, I love Mexico as a country, as a culture. I don't like the government though. The government is just at all levels. It's just, it's not a good.
Well, it seems like it's always been that way. I'm reading this book about Kit Carson and the Old West, and when the United States, conquered parts of California and took over parts of California and the West from Mexico, and it was crazy back then.
Yeah.
And they were talking about the chaos in the Mexican government and the Mexican military back then in the 1800s.
Yeah. So people kind of realize if you want to be an officer in the Mexican army, you have to go through war college, and there's different ways to go about it, but there's a lot of hereditary stuff going on.
Hereditary.
Like, hey, my dad was your general. Okay, there's a lot of that going on. Also, the army down there has a monopoly over selling guns. It's only one gun store in all of Mexico, and it's run by the army.
What?
Yep. One gun store in all of Mexico, and it's run by the army, and you have to fly to Mexico City to get a license and to procure a firearm legally.
So, if you live in the Yucatan,
you have to fly to Mexico.
You got to fly to Mexico City to get a gun.
Which basically makes the only options buying a gun on the black market, or flying over there and expending all this money. So now it's a class. So only people that can afford the plane ticket and to do this process are the ones that can have guns. So that's class. The class is involved in there as well.
What kind of rights do you have with guns versus the United States Second Amendment? Is it somewhere?
So the Mexican Constitution allows for guns for self-defense. But a lot of amendments and a lot of corrupt governments down there said maybe not a good idea to have this here. So progressively throughout recent Mexican history, it's become more and more strict. Right? Certain rounds aren't allowed, certain calibers aren't allowed, and just plainly the sale of firearms in all of Mexico is just relegated to a single gun store in Mexico City. So you can't carry them without a permit. And to get a permit, you have to know somebody that knows the presidente or a general or something.
Well, what about all those gentlemen we saw in that video just walking in front of those government agents with guns? Why didn't they arrest them?
They should have.
Seems like those lawbreakers.
The only people that respect those laws are law-abiding citizens. There was a case in Veracruz of an old man, a former army guy, older gentleman. His son tried to get abducted, something like that. He had this old Mauser rifle, and he shot dead one of the guys that was chasing him, was trying to abduct him. He was arrested for the firearm possession. And
Mauser is what Lee Harvey Oswald supposedly used on JFK.
Yeah.
That's an old-ass gun.
Well, there's a lot of weird old-ass stuff down there. As far as the stuff that gets handed over, or just the weird exotic firearms down there, a lot of people call Mexico the U.S.'s garage. And like garages, you just find weird stuff down there, from old World War II era pistols and explosives to new stuff. Like there's a friend of mine that works for the government down there told me that they found a bunch of parts for a minigun in a house somewhere down there.
What's a minigun?
It's basically remember that Terminator 2 movie?
Yeah.
That thing.
Oh, yeah.
It's pretty hard to get. Yeah, one of those. Apparently there's one out there somewhere on a vehicle of some sort.
Oh, Jesus.
It's basically obliterate everything.
Well, we talked about the Ed Holder Fast and Furious deal last time that you were here, and that, to me, still is one of the most bizarre cases in the history of an undercover operation that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah.
They sold guns, literally sold working guns
to a specific cartel down there.
So they could track them, or I don't remember what kind of bullshit argument that was.
But the interesting part, or if you want to go into the questions, that they benefited a single cartel, the Sinaloa cartel. That's the thing. That's most of the guns went to that.
If you had a guess, if you were a conspiracy theorist, put on your tinfoil hat, what do you think that was all about?
They were probably, as a nation, you were probably wanting to only worry about a single threat as far as cartels, and not a lot of cartels.
So they empowered one cartel?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, that was coming off the Patriot Act era, Bush era thing, I remember vividly people putting Geiger counters in some of the drug tunnels that we would find. So they were worried about nukes getting put into drug tunnels at some point during that whole post 9/11 era. So it would make sense that if you are worried about national security, you would want to not worry about a lot of cartels, maybe focus on one, support one, and just keep us in the know.
Do you think this was a covert operation in the sense that the Sinaloa cartel was not aware that they were doing this to empower them, to eliminate the competition, to strengthen one group because they just knew it was inevitable that someone takes control?
There's a lot of people that are now coming out after the whole... there's a lot of things that were said at the Chapo trial that would lead somebody to believe that there was some sort of official support from the U.S. government to the Sinaloa cartel, as far as them having deals with this cartel specifically to keep them in the know about things happening down there, supporting them to be in a position so they can keep control over their region, and basically as an information group so they can have a clear eye and ear in a chaotic area like Mexico on the bad guy side. That's what I gather from it.
Jesus Christ. But that kind of, it's almost like they feel like it's helpless. Like they have to do something like that. That they have to do that because there's no way to fix it. So what you got to do is kind of try to manage it or move it in certain directions.
So there's all, like every now and then I post some stuff up about that type of situation, and everybody goes to, well, the CIA has been running drugs into the U.S. for years and using planes and stuff like that. There are instances of CIA involvement in different stuff down in Mexico that are pretty obvious now from the 80s and the 90s, as far as supporting certain groups or just trying to keep tabs on these people. But I think we're coming to a point in our history where a lot of these people are dead, a lot of these people are in jail, a lot of these people got book deals, and a lot of these people are talking. And I mean, it's interesting seeing some of the stuff that is coming out now that in my time when I was active would have gotten you in a hole probably somewhere if you talked about it. So there was definitely, I mean, my mind was blown when I was seeing El Chapo on Netflix, because a lot of stuff that was going on in that show is fictionalized stuff that I went through myself. So I was like, this is on Netflix now.
How accurate was it?
There's some pretty good accurate parts. So there's a character in that show called
we're talking about Narcos, and we're talking about the Mexican version of Narcos, right? Because there was Colombian first.
Yeah, there's Narcos is pretty good. There's a El Chapo series on Netflix as well.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, it's in Spanish. It's very popular, but it's pretty accurate. There's a guy in the
Does it have subtitles?
It does.
Oh.
There's a guy in the show, Conrado Sol is his name, which people were trying to figure out who that was. Is basically a government guy that had a deal with El Chapo, and they both kind of escalated in power. It turns out it was Luna, right? So this show was showing him the character El Sol, which depicts Luna as a corrupt politician that was working security, working both sides, and all of a sudden, recently, a few weeks back, they arrested the guy.
Wow!
So the show was kind of predicting.
Do you think that the show had anything to do with him being arrested?
I mean, it probably put the idea in the zeitgeist of people to ask questions.
Yeah. That's weird that shows actually do that, like surviving R. Kelly. That's what got him arrested. I mean, everybody knew he was peeing on people, and like fucking 20 years ago, he's peeing on little kids.
But, and now it gives people like it's interesting. You see fictionalized forms of stuff that happened down there. The Narcos show as well is another thing. See fictionalized things of how some of these powerful cartel groups kind of originated themselves in fiction. And now that is in the public kind of domain as far as collective knowledge, so people start asking questions. And some of these things, apparently people in power also ask questions as well.
Jesus Christ. It's just, it's so strange how popular it's become, and it's such a popular focal point of fiction as well.
And fashion.
Yeah.
El Chapo's picture with Sean Penn.
Yeah.
The shirt was like fire. Everybody
Beautiful.
wanted that shirt.
You know that Conor McGregor wore something to mimic it on purpose when he was in the press conference for Rafael dos Anjos. Did you know that?
Yeah, I
He
heard something about it.
He stood in the same stance. Look at him. Look at him. I mean, he's doing it on purpose.
Yeah,
it's like a subtle nod to El Chapo.
Yeah, I mean, El Chapo has achieved legendary status. Now,
For sure.
Now, his kid that was freed by the cartel down there, he was wearing a scapulario, which is like I don't know if you can see it in there. It's an interesting, just piece of cultural thing from Mexico.
What is going on in this video that we're watching?
He just handed the gun over, his personal gun over to one of his bodyguards that was not even, these guys don't even care about him. This is a head camera thing, and you're putting everybody out there. And personally, I would put everybody in zip ties and on the ground, personally.
So these guys all have guns drawn, and there's people inside with guns drawn at them.
And they realize who they have now, so they're like, should we forcefully put him in cuffs? Should we not?
So how do you know that they're realizing this right? Is it because of the language?
All of
what
they're
saying?
I've went through a lot of the same training that they went through, and I did a lot of this type of stuff, and all of them would have been in zip ties on the ground.
Look at this girl reached out and grabbed their guns and put their guns down.
There's fear in these people. They realize that they messed up.
Oh, Jesus.
Right? So that's what, people question.
And are these streaming this video live?
They have
on their head cams?
They have a head cam, and they're streaming it. It's not, they have recording it, and it gets sent back to their command post. So when he was moving around, he had one of these on. This is a scapulario, it's called. It's like a religious Catholic iconography thing.
What is yours? What is it?
This is a Santa Muerte one, right? It's like a holy death effigy.
So he had that on.
His was a Santo Niño de Atocha, which is like a Catholic Christ baby saint they have. As soon as that picture of him went online, they were sold out all throughout Sinaloa. Everybody was wearing it. They have to work. They work. Those work.
Because got him free.
Got him free. There he is. That's a scapulario of Santo Niño de Atocha.
Handsome guy.
Yeah, that's also an interesting cultural thing. The occult part of it, where that Santo Niño de Atocha shrine is right now, it's probably the most popular shrines in Mexico are that one because they work. And then you go to the Holy Death shrines down there as well, and you see how both sides, both Mexican government forces and the cartel, they both venerate kind of the same saints. So that's a weird kind of thing. They share that faith.
What is that picture of his truck down there, Jamie? You have some wacky truck? No, it's just a regular truck.
That's one of his.
It's riddled with bullets.
He gave out cars on Christmas. He did this party to any townspeople, or he was.
How many cars did he give out?
I have no idea. Like a lot of them. There's pictures of El Chapo's son gives out cars on Christmas, and there's a bunch of cars there. Again, who are you? Who are you gonna go towards him?
Of course,
government. You give me a car, you don't give me anything.
Yeah, they like you said, hearts and minds. They're really
hearts and minds, they pay for college education. So there's a whole generation of lawyers, a whole generation of doctors. They pay for immigration procedures. So hey, you wanna yeah, I'll pay for your immigration, but I'm gonna call in some favors later on. Okay.
Wow.
So that's how they grow.
It's full on mafia shit.
Yeah, I mean they learned that.
One day I'll come to you.
Al Capone, Scarface, all these things are kind of venerated by them. That's kind of their cultural backing. They have pop cultural backing. They kind of look to the mob era guys as influence or as inspiration. You see, insane paintings of The Godfather or Scarface in some of these safe houses where these people are, right? And you're like, wow, okay. Or you see cartel-influenced series for Netflix. There's one called La Reina del Sur, which is about a female cartel head. The lady that stars in that show was the one that took Sean Penn down there to meet El Chapo because El Chapo was a fan of that show. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
That's how it got going?
When they finally caught up to him, he had the whole series on DVDs at his house, which is pretty. He humanized him a little bit.
Oh my God! That whole scene with Sean Penn going down there and writing a story for Rolling Stone was uber bizarre.
Yeah. Well, if they get the terrorist designation, he basically went down there to meet with a terrorist.
What happens to him then? Is it retroactive?
I don't know.
But he helped get him arrested in a sense, right?
Well, he basically that whole commotion put eyes on the movements of El Chapo by the Mexican government.
Why would El Chapo agree to do something like that?
He was a fan of the show.
That seems so crazy, though. Doesn't it seem crazy that he was willing to take that kind of a risk and take a photo with Sean Penn and that actress?
Well,
what's her name again?
Cate del Castillo.
Yeah, right there. Chapo's probably banging that, right? If I had to guess.
There's rumors. There's rumors of a meeting. That's about it. I don't know anything else.
If I had to guess, I would say yes. It was just the whole thing. Look at Sean Penn smiling. Hey, here's my friend the murderer.
Well, I mean, I get the. I mean, I've heard some of the stuff Sean Penn said about Chavez in Venezuela and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. How he's pro Chavez and stuff like that. And I have friends of mine that live in Venezuela under that regime. So he's a pretty kooky guy. He has some pretty interesting ideas about.
He can't possibly be that informed.
I don't know.
I mean, how you really have to have boots on the ground to understand what the fuck you're talking about. I mean, you have to be there for, if you want to know what's going on in Venezuela, there's so many different stories. My friend Abby Martin's been down there multiple times, and she gives me a story that's so different than anything that you're getting in mainstream news, and she goes there. Yeah. She goes there and talks to people.
Yeah.
Spends time.
Well, there's a resistance group that is based in the U.S. that works down there, and they put up videos all the time of people picking up garbage and trying to recycle garbage to feed themselves in some places. Instagram immediately takes all those down. Right?
Really?
Yeah.
Why does Instagram take those down?
I have a lot of that going on as well. When I post something completely news related about something and then get shadow banned, or things just go down depending on what I post up, like weird things. Posted up a Venezuelan people throwing rocks at this armored vehicle, and I think one of them got run over. And that got taken down. I didn't show the part where he got run over, but just the people protesting.
How would that get taken down?
It got flagged as support for a hate group or something like that.
Support for a hate group by showing the news?
Yeah, or showing a picture of cartel. And again, I don't post anything graphic on my feed because I don't want to get banned, but I'm still shadow banned. Right? So
well, you showed that one, by the way, Ed Manifesto. That's how you find it. Ed Manifesto. That's Ed's page. You posted that one where you saw a guy getting abducted. By fake cops.
Yeah. And
did that one get pulled?
Yeah,
it did.
Yeah, all of the recent Sinaloa video ones were all pulled off the Instagram account. That's why I had to re-upload them all.
I just don't understand their logic. I mean, look, I can understand them saying caution, some of these images and videos are sensitive, like with some bloody things and things along those lines.
Something changed in the algorithms a year back. Like when I was on the first time I was on your show, I got, obviously I saw a spike, thank you by the way, but all of the pro Second Amendment pages and people, like there's a guy, Crispy, who was a veteran. He got a lot. All of a sudden, all of us started seeing a lot of our stuff flagged.
Yeah, his stuff got taken down.
Yeah,
I think there was a photo of him with Donald Trump that got taken down.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Or I think it was Donald Trump Jr.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is wrong with you people?
Yeah.
Just because you don't align with someone politically, you can't take down photos, and you can't pretend that he's posing with Hitler or something. Like, what the fuck is wrong with you?
People can report things anonymously, I think, and
yes,
and if you hurt my feelings, there you go.
So if there's enough people that flag your video and say this is hurtful or they don't even look into it, they just pull it down.
Yeah.
So who do you think is doing? Do you think this Mexican government that's doing that? Do you think it's the cartels that are doing that to your page?
I think it's mostly Americans that have sensibilities that are completely beyond my comprehension. That see a gun in a picture and they're afraid of the gun, and it's terrorism. They're supporting terrorism hate group. Let's report that picture or video.
Well, I can understand how some of what you're reporting on, truthful as it may be, would be disturbing to people to find out that truth. But you gotta let people do that. I mean, what does Instagram want to do? I mean, do they want to put parameters on what kind of truth you're allowed to distribute?
So. Just for people to get some context, I do work for two magazine companies, and I do articles. So, in that regard, I do provide news in certain ways. But when I post something on my page, it's a personal view of something. I purposefully don't go into graphic material because I don't want to get flagged. But sometimes there's always people with a certain affinity to when they see a gun in a post, or where they see an animal being butchered for something like in a picture, or when they see hunting related stuff, or when they see some sort of, I remember posting up a picture of the Make Tijuana Great Again hats that they were making down there. Red hats that said Make Tijuana Great Again when the caravans went into TJ and people started protesting the caravans in TJ. That got flagged.
What? That is so crazy. Oh.
You know, if you want to confuse, if you want to make people angry and confused, just wear one of those hats through the airport.
Yeah, well, a lady got maced in the face for wearing one that said "Make Bitcoin Great Again."
Yeah,
some guy maced her in the face.
Yeah, I saw
knocked her hat off.
I saw somebody walk in an airport with a "Make Hentai Great Again" hat.
Make anything great again. You can't do it. It's too close.
Yeah, it's too close. I mean, the hat, red hat.
I've never seen anything more divisive in this country. I mean, other than like a swastika or something like overtly disgusting.
I started my immigration process when he got elected.
Oh no.
It's been a trip,
How does that work? Like, if you are a Mexican-born citizen and you want to become a United States citizen, obviously it's very difficult.
So, married to an American, have an American kid. That's how I went through the process myself, and I got a green card. The thing is that when he got elected, everybody said, you know what? Maybe our time to get a green card is going to be less and less. So let's all try and get one. So what would take normally 6 months took 2 years.
Oh wow!
So in those 2 years, you can't leave the country.
So if what happens to people that are illegal? That's what's fucked up about it, right? It's like there's people that came over here illegally 20, 30 years ago, and they've done no crimes, they've been an integral part of society, they've had great lives, but they can't pay taxes, they can't vote, they have to live undercover.
Yeah,
I mean, fuck, stupid.
They're and they do provide, provide, they pay taxes through other
sales tax, buying things, but they're not paying taxes, they're not, but if you made them citizens, you would make money.
Yeah, well, it's not a popular view.
It's a stupid view.
It's stupid that we have these people and they're permanent illegals. Yeah. And they will be here until they die illegally, and we know they're here. Like, how about work with what you've got? Look, you're doing your best to stop the border traffic. Great, fantastic. But listen, let's just forget about the past. These people are here. They're here and they're a part of our community. Like, how are you going to deny them citizenship till the day they die and they're still here?
Well, legal immigration, just like I went through, is hard enough.
You gotta find some American lady. That shit's difficult.
I did, but it was a hard process. It's a difficult process.
And you speak fluent English.
Yes, that's another thing. I saw people in the line with me, that did not speak a lick of English, but they were from a country that had a quota. Great, they're fine.
Like Holland or some shit.
From a country that has a quota, so they're great. But you're not.
It's hard for Canadians, man. I have friends from Canada that have come over here to try to become citizens. It's a fucking grind.
Yeah. and don't get me wrong, I love this country. I'm new here, and I like what I see. I don't like where it's going in some places.
What don't you like?
I don't like I left my country because I couldn't defend myself from the bad people out there.
The Second Amendment.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. You have no idea how beautiful that is until you don't have an option to have it. That's one thing. I like the opportunities this country provides. I've had a lot of opportunities to never get anywhere else. I like that you actually work, the work you put in matters. I like how it's segmented and different. You go to Tennessee and you meet people out there. They're great people. You know, there's some people have preconceived notions of what some part of the countries are, but I don't. And then you go to California and you meet people that are on the same boat as I was, and they're forgot completely what Mexico is, and they're completely Americanized, and they're completely against you as a person.
Really? So you find that like Americanized Mexicans or like second, third generation Mexicans?
The worst enemy of the Mexicans is another Mexican. Classic.
What?
That's a classic Mexican saying, and it's true.
That's a classic Mexican saying. Really?
Most of the negativity I got from being on your show the first time was from Latinos, specifically Mexicans and Latinos.
What was the negativity? What was their criticism?
When I talked about how Mexicans in the caravans going through Tijuana and wrecking their city, that was viewed as an extreme to the right or conservative viewpoint of apparently.
Yeah, but that was a fact.
But yeah, apparently facts don't matter.
Oh, that's so silly. Well, that's people. That's a good example of people that are not there.
Yeah.
They're talking about it. You're not saying, you didn't make a value judgment saying that those people coming through protested by Mexicans need to go back to where fucking rice paddy they come from. You didn't say any of that.
No. So this is what I saw when I talked about it, because I experienced it. I was in TJ for a while when that was happening. Byron Caravan goes through. Obviously, a lot of those guys were gang members. A lot of them were covering tattoos. It's pretty hot outside. Wearing all the boarding hoodies. Cameras came by. The females and the children were being put in front, paraded in front of the media. To anybody that was there, you could see the circus. And then a lot of the camp encampments, they would litter the encampments with needle on the outside. One of them was next to the school that had to be closed down. A niece of mine had a kid in there. The school had to be closed down because it was next to one of the encampments. They would protest to close down lanes. Those people that live in TJ, some of them are Americans and they commute, so that's affecting their livelihood. People that work on tourism in TJ, livelihood went down. So the fact that these people came in and disrupted the whole thing, and then you would see these Californian, hippie American guys come down there and do puppet shows for these people, and hand over donations in the form of canned food, blankets, and stuff like that. And then you would see these guys go to the back door and sell all that stuff in the back and just get money for whatever they were going to use the money for. We would laugh at it, but also, it's hard. Having that point of view online, because I started posting some of this stuff online for people. This is what's happening. And that was like, no, you're going against the narrative.
The narrative, yeah. The narrative, and the people that are talking about going against the narrative have really no idea. They don't care about the truth. That's what's crazy.
The absolute is thing. So if you're against this caravan going through Tijuana and affecting you're probably a Trump supporter. That's it. I'm like,
so simple.
I can't even vote up here yet. I have to be a full citizen to vote, so that it doesn't even factor in on
that. God damn, it's so crazy. What else about America bothers you?
I think there's definitely this tendency in America that I see the youth in America. I have a weird mental comparison of seeing my nephews down there playing soccer, going out and getting into trouble, going to cockfights, which is probably pretty dangerous, but they go to cockfights, stuff like that. And I see kids up here on their tablet,
playing games, video games,
getting offended by something, Down there, you can still punch somebody in the face if they get in your face in school.
Up You're allowed to do that in school?
You're gonna be. There's still that. Up here, it's gone. All that's gone. You're gonna get into some issues. Probably gonna get out of school or something. You see this weird
pussification of American children.
safe spaces.
Yeah.
Don't say that. That's politically incorrect.
Pussification.
What's a good word for it?
What's the come up with a politically correct word for that has just as much kick, and I'll use that. They can't. It doesn't exist. It's the pussification.
Yeah. I mean, and when I came up here, like the first year I was up here, I saw the California gun laws change. Like I got to see weird California compliant rifles come to the range, and you have to push a button to release the magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and make it more difficult to reload.
Yeah,
so strange.
Well, I mean, if I've never seen a California compliant gun in the hands of a criminal myself, right? So why are the good citizens following the law?
Yeah, the idea that you're just going to handicap law-abiding citizens, and that's going to somehow or another save lives in mass shootings. And here's the other thing about, and I'm waiting for this to happen, but it's just not happening. They're never addressing people using psychotropic drugs. They don't address that. All those school shooters, all those mass shooters are all on drugs.
Yeah.
They're all on some kind of psych drugs. And there's no mention of it whatsoever. Like what is the action of these things? It's all about the guns.
Yeah.
And the guns are a huge issue. I mean, the fact that these people who are fucked up, and that they have access and they can get access to these guns, and they can wind up.
That was cold, boy. Oh. How long that live went for, bro? Oh, it's out. Oh shit. Is it still going?